Terrifying secret. Inside an 8,000-year-old tomb has been revealed, shocking the world. Hello, and welcome to the Ancient History channel. My friends, people often think archaeology is a dry profession, digging in the dirt, uncovering old objects, and bringing them back for study. But you know what? The truth is far from that. Because sometimes it takes just a single strike of an archaeologist's shovel for a terrifying secret from the past to be dragged into the light. From skeletal remains found in bizarre positions, to graves arranged in ways no one can explain, or artifacts bearing traces of rituals that science still can't fully understand to this day, all of it is enough to send chills down anyone's spine. And what's even more striking is that these discoveries are not rare. All around the world, from remote and desolate regions to places that seem all too familiar, archaeologists have continuously uncovered evidence that forces them to ask, how did ancient humans truly live? And what did they believe in? Some of these stories, once revealed, have sparked intense debate within the scientific community, sometimes even silence, because no one can fully explain them. And the deeper researchers dig, the more they analyze, the more they begin to realize one unsettling truth. The past was far from as gentle as we once believed. So, are you curious to find out what mysterious discoveries archaeologists have brought to light in recent years? And what terrifying secrets might be hidden behind them? If your answer is yes, then right now, let's dive into today's video together. 8,000-year-old child's grave reveals an ancient ritual that shocked scientists. During an excavation on Alor Island, a remote island in Indonesia where nature remains largely untouched and barely influenced by modern humans, a team of scientists from the Australian National University discovered an ancient grave dating back to the early Holocene period, around 8,000 years ago. But what truly stunned them was not its age. It was the remains of a child and the way the child had been buried. According to analysis, the child was only about 4 to 8 years old, an age that should have been filled with laughter, yet instead became the center of a mysterious burial ritual. And here's the unsettling part. The deeper researchers looked into it, the more they realized this was no ordinary grave. According to Dr. Sofia Samper-Caro, who led the excavation, modern analytical technologies revealed a highly unusual detail. On the child's face, specifically the cheeks and forehead, there were traces of red pigment, known as ochre. This was not something that appeared by chance. It had clearly been deliberately applied by human hands as part of a ritual. And it didn't stop there. Just beneath the child's head, archaeologists also discovered a pebble stained with the same red ochre. This led them to a major question. Could this red color have held some kind of spiritual meaning? Was it a symbol of life, of blood, or perhaps a way to guide the soul into the afterlife? But even that wasn't the most disturbing part. What truly makes this discovery haunting is the fact that the child's arm and leg bones had been removed before burial. Yes, you heard that right. The body was not intact when it was laid to rest. These bones appear to have been taken elsewhere and treated in some way that science has still not been able to clearly explain. So why did ancient people do this? Was it part of a sacred ritual or a belief system we have yet to understand? That question still lingers. However, Dr. Samper-Caro acknowledges that this may have been an element of the belief system of the people at that time, a system that remains largely a mystery to this day. What makes this even more remarkable is that such a burial practice is extremely rare, and this is the first time it has ever been documented in Indonesia. Because of that, this is not just an archaeological discovery. It opens a doorway into the past, revealing that ancient people may have had very different perspectives on death, especially when it came to the death of a child. 8,000-year-old sun seal, the mystery of ancient power, just revealed. There are things that lie silently beneath the earth for thousands of years, seemingly forgotten entirely, yet with just one excavation, they can tell a story of power, belief, and secrets that modern humans may not fully understand. And this time, that story begins at an ancient mound known as Yeşilova, located in Izmir, Turkey. During what seemed like a routine excavation, experts from the Turkish Ministry of Culture and Tourism unexpectedly discovered a small artifact, yet one carrying the weight of thousands of years of history. It was a stone seal, estimated to be around 8,000 years old. At first glance, it might seem simple, right? But the more closely experts examined it, the deeper they analyzed it, the more they realized this was no ordinary object. Using modern archaeological techniques, From material analysis to chronological comparison, researchers gradually uncovered a remarkable possibility. This seal may once have belonged to a king, someone who stood at the very peak of power thousands of years ago. And this detail alone has sparked intense curiosity, because if true, it could represent one of the rare pieces of evidence of an early power structure in human history. But what makes this seal truly extraordinary lies in the design carved onto its surface. At the center of the seal is an image resembling the sun, radiating 7 evenly spaced rays, a symbol that may appear simple, yet carries profound meaning across many ancient cultures. Think about it. Why the sun? And why 7 rays, not 6 or 8? According to researchers, during the Neolithic period, the sun was not merely a source of light. It was seen as a symbol of supreme deities, closely associated with the sky and life itself. Therefore, a king using a seal bearing the sun symbol may not have been simply marking ownership, but asserting a form of sacred authority, as if he were protected or even sanctioned by the gods. The seal measures about 2.8 inches in diameter. Not large, but enough to leave a clear impression when used. And this detail raises even more questions. What was it used to stamp? Clay? Documents? Or ritual objects? Of course, those questions remain unanswered. For now, experts continue to study the seal in greater depth, especially by using microscopes to examine its surface. Patterns of wear, tiny traces, and subtle marks. All of these could be the keys to unlocking the true purpose of this artifact. And you know what? The most fascinating part isn't what we've discovered, it's what we still don't fully understand. A small seal, yet it opens up a vast picture of power, belief, and how ancient people perceive the world. So what do you think? Was this seal simply a tool of a king, or was it a symbol of something far greater, where power and divinity became one? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's explore it together. The mysterious 3-person tomb and the truth behind the murals that made everyone think. There are some tombs that, once excavated, don't just tell a story about death, they reveal deeply human, everyday secrets of those who have passed on. And sometimes it's the smallest details, a strange posture, a painting on a wall, that become the key to unlocking a story no one ever expected. The story of this mysterious tomb of 3 individuals is a perfect example. It all began in November 2010. While surveying a section of Dingfeng Road along the Xiaodong Expressway in Henan Province, China, an archaeological team accidentally discovered traces of an ancient tomb buried underground. At first, the signs were faint, but as excavation progressed, they quickly realized there weren't just 1, but 2 tombs lying less than 33 feet apart, one large and one small, both constructed from brick. Normally, a discovery like this would spark excitement, but this time, that excitement was quickly dampened. The larger tomb had been looted long ago. The burial chamber had collapsed, and its structure was severely damaged, leaving almost nothing of research value. In the end, the only artifact recovered was an ancient coin inscribed with the words Huang Song Tong Bao. Based on this coin, experts determined it was minted between 1039 and 1053, during the reign of Emperor Renzong of the Northern Song dynasty. This also allowed them to estimate that the larger tomb dated back to the Northern Song period. But perhaps the most intriguing part wasn't the ruined tomb, it was the smaller one just a few steps away. When the team began excavating the smaller tomb, they could hardly believe their eyes. In stark contrast to the larger one, this tomb was completely intact, untouched and undisturbed. And that's when a series of astonishing discoveries began to unfold. Inside, they found a coffin containing 2 sets of skeletal remains lying side by side. But what made it so strange was their posture. The leg bones appeared near the chest area, an arrangement that is difficult to explain using conventional burial practices. And it didn't stop there. Right next to the coffin was a small niche containing a 3rd set of remains. However, this skeleton was not intact. The bones were scattered and disorganized, as if they had been moved or handled in some way before being placed there. 3 individuals, yet buried in 3 completely different ways within the same space. Just think about that. What could have happened? The answer may lie on the walls of the tomb itself. Surrounding the chamber were murals whose colors remained surprisingly vivid, depicting scenes of everyday life. In total, there were 6 paintings, each telling its own story. The southwest wall featured a mural known as the banquet preparation scene, showing 3 servants preparing a feast. The northwest wall displayed the drinking scene, where two people sat across from each other at a table, accompanied by a woman holding a wine jug. Directly facing the tomb entrance was the door opening scene, portraying a woman slightly opening a door and looking outside. On the ceiling were smaller paintings reflecting the spiritual and religious beliefs of the tomb's occupants. Because no burial goods were found in the tomb, experts initially could not determine its exact age. However, based on the artistic techniques used in the murals, such as monochrome sketching, outlining, color filling, and shading, they identified styles characteristic of the late Northern Song period. From this, they concluded that the tomb likely dates back to that era. So who were the individuals buried inside this chamber? Upon closely examining the drinking scene, a theory about the identity and lives of the tomb's occupants began to take shape. Many researchers believe the tomb owner may have had both a primary wife and a concubine. The woman seated at the table is thought to be the lawful wife, while the woman standing beside her pouring wine may have been the concubine. It is possible that the three individuals were originally buried in separate locations, but for some reason, their remains were later reinterred together. However, due to her lower social status, the concubine may not have been allowed to rest within the main burial chamber, which could explain why her remains were placed separately in a nearby niche. Hearing this, doesn't the story feel both familiar and unsettling? One tomb, three individuals, and murals that, though seemingly lifeless, quietly tell a story of a complex relationship from the past. This discovery has helped archaeologists gain deeper insight into the daily life, clothing, and customs of people during the Song dynasty. It's no exaggeration to say that sometimes history doesn't need words. It simply leaves behind enough traces for us to piece the story together ourselves. Fascinating, isn't it? 100,000-year-old plug. Traces of an erased civilization. When we think of fossils, we usually imagine dinosaur bones, ancient seashells, or plant remains that have turned to stone over millions of years, right? But what if one day, right before your eyes, there appeared an object that looks exactly like a modern electrical device, encased in rock from tens of thousands of years ago? How would you react? You probably wouldn't believe it, right? And yet, such an object has actually been reported. The story goes back to 1998 when an electrical engineer named John Williams, during what seemed like an ordinary vacation, accidentally picked up a strange rock. At first glance, it didn't seem unusual until he discovered something almost unbelievable embedded inside it, a three-prong electrical plug, the kind of device we still see in modern life today. Without hesitation, Williams brought the rock home, and it immediately caught the attention of the scientific community. Researchers quickly stepped in, not just out of curiosity, but because they realized this could be an extremely important clue, one that might even challenge humanity's understanding of the history of civilization. As a first step, they determined the age of the rock using carbon-14 isotope analysis. The result left everyone stunned. The rock was estimated to be around 100,000 years old, a number far beyond what we associate with the development of human technology. But the shock didn't end there. Scientists continued investigating whether the plug could be a hoax or a fabricated object. They analyzed its structure, surface, and level of corrosion, and concluded that there were no signs it had been inserted into the rock at a later time. On the contrary, all evidence suggested it had been naturally embedded within the rock for a very long time. They then used X-ray scanning to examine it more deeply, and what they found made the mystery even harder to believe. The plug still exhibited a weak magnetic field. This suggests that, under certain conditions, it might even still function. At this point, you're probably wondering, if the rock is 100,000 years old, then when did this plug actually originate? And who could have created it? To address this, scientists proposed a bold hypothesis. Based on how deeply the plug is embedded within the rock, it's possible that the object existed first and was later encased by natural geological processes over tens of thousands of years. If that's true, its actual age could be far older than 100,000 years. From there, a wave of theories began to emerge. Some believe this could be evidence of an extraterrestrial civilization that once visited Earth in the distant past. Others argue it might be a remnant of a prehistoric human civilization, one that reached a high level of technological advancement but, for unknown reasons, completely disappeared. There are even those who suggest the plug looks so similar to modern devices that it can't simply be a coincidence. Could this be evidence of a cycle of civilization where humanity once advanced, then destroyed itself, only for history to begin again. All of these ideas sound like something out of a science fiction movie, yet they are tied to an object now in the hands of researchers. So what do you think? Is this a misunderstood piece of evidence, a sophisticated hoax, or truly a remnant of a lost world buried deep in the past? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The baby mummy, with the arm that shocked the archaeological world. It sounds like a joke at first, but this story left many scientists completely stunned for more than a decade. A tiny baby mummy, no bigger than you might imagine, was found clutching a corroded coin in its hand. And that strange detail opened the door to one of the most puzzling mysteries in modern archaeology. The story began in 2005, when Dr. János Balázs, a Hungarian archaeologist, was conducting an excavation in the village of Nyarlarinc in southern Hungary. Among more than 500 graves dating from the 12th to the 16th century, he came across something that didn't resemble anything else at the site. At first glance, it was so small that it was mistaken for the remains of a mouse, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was actually the arm of a child. And what sent chills down everyone's spine was this: the tiny hand was tightly gripping a copper coin. That wasn't all. Other recovered remains, including several vertebrae, parts of the pelvis, and leg bones, displayed an unusual green coloration. Both arms had turned green, but the right arm, the one holding the coin, was covered in a layer of dried tissue that was almost completely preserved. The skin on the back had also survived, still attached to 5 vertebrae. Meanwhile, the ribcage and shoulder bones appeared largely unaffected. Even at this point, something clearly felt off, right? But it took years of research after the discovery for Dr. Balázs and his team to determine that this was a premature infant, or a baby who died shortly after birth. The body measured only about 11 to 13 inches in length and weighed less than 2.2 pounds. Yet the question that continues to puzzle experts to this day is, why was there a coin in the baby's hand? As you may know, in archaeology, bones turning green is not uncommon, especially when they come into contact with metals like copper. However, in this case, the concentration of copper found in the remains was hundreds of times higher than normal. In fact, this is considered the highest copper concentration ever recorded in a mummy. The copper effectively acted as a natural preservative, preventing the child's hand from decomposing over time. Researchers also discovered a small ceramic vessel along with another heavily corroded coin. This led to the theory that before burial, the ancient people placed the coin in the baby's hand and then placed the entire body inside the vessel. Sound familiar? That's right. In many ancient cultures, coins were placed with the dead as a form of fare for the soul to journey into the afterlife. But the mystery doesn't end there. When scientists analyzed the coin, they discovered it was a kreutzer, a type of currency circulated between 1858 and 1862. This completely contradicts the dating of the burial site, which belongs to the medieval period. According to historical records, Christians of that era did not practice burying their dead with coins. So the question remains, who buried this child? And why did they use a ritual that didn't belong to that time? To this day, these questions remain unanswered. On one side, there is a rare scientific explanation involving copper-based mummification. On the other, there is a historical gap that still cannot be filled. What do you think is the most plausible explanation in this case? Ancient human remains in the Americas, revealing a forgotten massacre. In a quiet ancient burial ground where hundreds of skeletons had lain undisturbed for centuries, one set of remains suddenly seemed to speak, telling the story of a terrifying moment when history took a dramatic turn, not through words, but through a single hole in the skull, a trace left by a bullet from the distant past. This is the story from Peru, near what is now the capital city of Lima. During an excavation at an ancient Inca burial site in Puruchuco, Peru, archaeologist Guillermo Koch and his team discovered a skeleton with highly unusual characteristics. At first, they assumed it might belong to a relatively modern individual, perhaps a victim of recent violence. But the deeper they analyzed, the stranger it became. Eventually, the truth emerged, leaving everyone stunned. The remains actually belonged to a native individual from the 16th century, a time when the Inca Empire was facing one of the most significant upheavals in its history: the Spanish invasion. Most shocking of all, the skull had been pierced by a bullet. Yes, you heard that correctly, a bullet. Forensic experts conducted a detailed examination and identified a clear trajectory. The bullet entered from the back of the skull, passed through the head, and exited through the facial area. This indicates that the victim likely had no chance to defend themselves. But how could researchers be certain that this was a bullet fired by Spanish forces? The answer lies in modern technology. Using scanning probe microscopy, researchers from the University of Connecticut detected traces of metal, specifically iron, around the wound in the skull. These traces are consistent with damage caused by a musket, the type of firearm used by Spanish soldiers during their conquest of the Americas. At this point, the historical picture begins to take shape. It is highly likely that this individual was an Inca warrior who took part in resistance efforts against Spanish forces led by Francisco Pizarro, particularly during the Siege of Lima in 1536. This was a brutal conflict in which the indigenous people's rudimentary weapons were no match for the advanced firearms brought from Europe. But the story extends far beyond a single individual. Since 2004, archaeologists have excavated around 500 skeletons at the Purachuco burial site. Among them, more than 70 bodies were buried hastily, without jewelry or grave goods, completely contrary to the elaborate and respectful burial traditions of the Inca. Even more striking, over 30 skeletons show signs of severe trauma caused by iron weapons. What does that suggest? It strongly points to the possibility that these were victims of violent clashes, buried quickly while the conflict was still ongoing. No rituals, no ceremonies, just cold earth covering lives swept away by the tides of history. And that skull with the bullet hole stands as the first clear piece of evidence in the Americas showing that indigenous people were killed by Spanish firearms. This discovery is not only archaeologically significant, it also serves as a powerful reminder that behind the grand narratives of history lie countless tragic stories that have never been fully told. Hearing this, doesn't the past suddenly feel closer? As if all it takes is lifting a thin layer of soil for an entire blood-soaked era to reappear right before our eyes. Chilling yet undeniably fascinating, wouldn't you agree? The 200-year-old beauty whose body never decayed, still emitting a gentle fragrance in an ancient Chinese tomb. Have you ever imagined that a body buried underground for hundreds of years could still give off a soft, pleasant fragrance, as if time had never touched it? It sounds like something straight out of a historical drama, but this story is completely real. In fact, it left Chinese archaeologists utterly astonished when it was first discovered. Everything began on March 23, 2001, when a group of construction workers were carrying out a project in Dongshan County, Suzhou City, Anhui Province, China. While digging, they suddenly struck a hard object deep underground. As they continued to excavate, an ancient coffin gradually emerged, buried more than 13 feet below the surface. Realizing this was no ordinary find, they immediately notified local authorities and archaeological experts. Once the archaeologists arrived and carefully opened the coffin, what happened next left everyone in shock. Instead of the strong, unpleasant odor typically associated with decomposition, a faint, gentle fragrance drifted into the air. Some even claimed that the scent could be detected from several hundred meters away. Chilling, isn't it? Inside the coffin lay the body of a woman. What's truly astonishing is that her state of preservation seemed to defy all conventional understanding. Her black hair was still neatly tied back. Her pale skin had not fully decomposed and retained an incredible level of elasticity. Some of her joints could still move slightly, giving the eerie impression that she had only recently passed away. After thorough examination, experts determined that the woman had died around 200 years ago. She stood about 5 feet 3 inches tall, weighed around 97 pounds, and was only about 30 years old at the time of her death. A very young age, which makes the mystery even more intriguing. The unusual fragrance emanating from her body led many to draw comparisons to a famous figure in Chinese popular culture. Fragrant concubine Xiang Fei, a legendary beauty said to emit a natural scent that attracted butterflies, as depicted in the TV series My Fair Princess. But could this be a real-life inspiration behind the legend? To answer that question, historians quickly stepped in and proposed that the character of Xiang Fei was actually based on Consort Rong, a favored concubine of the Qianlong Emperor. She came from a noble Uyghur family in Xinjiang and was brought into the imperial court for political reasons. Consort Rong was known for her beauty, intelligence, and the emperor's deep affection for her. However, historical records tell a very different story. There is no mention whatsoever of Consort Rong possessing any natural body fragrance. More importantly, the examination of the body in the coffin completely ruled out this theory. On the woman's neck, researchers discovered a deep T-shaped cut, a clear indication that she had been murdered, possibly with a sword, and likely had little to no chance to defend herself. In contrast, historical accounts state that Consort Rong died at the age of 54 due to illness, with no connection to any violent death. So who was the woman in this coffin? Why did her body not decompose like normal remains? And how could it still emit such a mysterious fragrance after 200 years? Could there be a hidden secret in the burial method, or perhaps an untold story that history never recorded? What do you think is the most plausible explanation for this mystery? If you have any theories, don't hesitate to share them in the comments below the video so everyone can join the discussion. The mysterious mass grave at Chon Chan, uncovering the secret of 30 people and a lost civilization. There are places that, at first glance, seem like nothing more than the worn-out remnants of a bygone era. But the deeper you dig, the more unsettling the stories become. The ancient city of Chon Chan in Peru is one of those places. A site where, beneath layers of dry, barren earth, lies a mystery that has remained unsolved for centuries. The story began with an excavation at Chon Chan, an ancient city located about 310 miles north of Lima, Peru. Archaeologists discovered a mass grave dating back to the 15th century. At first it seemed like an ordinary burial site. But as the layers of soil were carefully removed, the truth beneath left everyone in stunned silence. Inside the grave were the remains of 25 to 30 individuals. What stood out immediately was that most of them were women and children. Even more striking, the majority of the women appeared to be under the age of 30. Just hearing that raises questions, doesn't it? A burial site with so many individuals, but very few adult men. So what exactly happened here? The mystery deepened when archaeologists uncovered tens of thousands of ceramic vessels along with numerous artifacts, including needles and textile tools. These were not ordinary, everyday items. They bore clear signs of belonging to individuals of high social status. Because of this, experts believe the site may have been the resting place of elites from the Chimu culture, a civilization that once flourished along the northern coast of Peru. The tomb itself is not particularly large, measuring only about 10 feet by 10 feet, yet it contains an astonishing number of remains. This has led many to ask, could this have been a site of mass human sacrifice? Addressing this question, archaeologist Jorge Menese explained that the Chimu people did indeed practice human sacrifice. However, what makes this case unusual is that there is no clear evidence showing that such rituals were ever performed within the city of Chon Chan itself. In other words, while the possibility of sacrifice exists, it cannot yet be confirmed. So what caused the deaths of these individuals? To find answers, researchers have had to analyze each skeleton in detail, examining trauma marks on bones as well as environmental factors surrounding the burial. Every bone fragment, every artifact, could serve as a crucial piece of the puzzle in reconstructing a story that has been buried for centuries. Even so, it may take much more time before a definitive conclusion can be reached. For now, all we can do is wait. Now, let's take a moment to talk about Chon Chan itself. Chon Chan is far from an ordinary site. In the Chimu language, its name means radiant sun. True to its name, it was once the center of power for a civilization that thrived from around 900 to 1450. Covering an area of about 7.7 square miles, Chon Chan was built as a massive fortress, featuring 10 large palaces surrounded by high, solid walls. At its peak, it was home to around 30,000 people. But everything changed when the Inca Empire rose to power and conquered the region. A once glorious civilization collapsed, leaving behind ruins and countless unanswered questions. In 1986, Chon Chan was recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ironically, it was also placed on the list of endangered heritage sites due to the effects of weather and human activity. Because of this, scientists are now racing against time to preserve and uncover the secrets that still remain hidden beneath the surface. The time-traveling glass cup found in a 1,000-year-old princess's tomb. Sometimes, when we look back at history, we realize that 10,000 years of human civilization is really just a blink of an eye compared to Earth's 4.5 billion-year timeline. Countless dynasties have risen and fallen, and countless bloody wars have faded into the past. What remains are a few lines in history books or secrets lying silently underground, waiting to be uncovered. And sometimes, those very secrets make us question whether the past was truly as primitive as we often assume. A striking example of this dates back to 1986, when a group of workers were constructing a reservoir in Tongliao City, Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, China. While digging, they unexpectedly discovered an ancient tomb, later identified by experts as belonging to the Liao dynasty. What began as a chance discovery quickly revealed its immense value, drawing attention from both archaeologists and the public. At the time, knowledge about the Liao dynasty was still quite limited. Previously discovered royal tombs had mostly been severely damaged, offering little research value. This tomb, therefore, was like a rare doorway into the past of a once powerful dynasty that existed from 907 to 1125. After careful study, experts determined that this was the tomb of Princess Chen of the Liao dynasty, the granddaughter of Emperor Jingzong. She held a noble status, yet her life was tragically short. Born in 1001, she passed away in 1018 at just 18 years old, an age when life should have only just begun. Historical records indicate that she was deeply favored by the royal family. Her title was changed multiple times, from Princess Taiping to Princess of the State of Yue, reflecting her special position within the imperial court. This also explains why her tomb was constructed with such intricate craftsmanship and filled with countless valuable treasures. According to the tomb inscription, the princess died suddenly from illness, just 2 years after marrying her uncle, who was 10 years older than her. Inside the tomb, alongside a large number of burial items such as gold, silver, lacquerware, pearls, agate, amber, and fine silk, archaeologists were astonished to discover glass cups that looked almost identical to modern drinking glasses. These cups featured thin walls, thick bases, and perfectly smooth curves, so refined that if you placed them in a bar today, few would suspect they were made 1,000 years ago. There was only one small detail that made them not entirely modern: a golden lid attached to the cup by a delicate chain. Without this feature, experts might have mistaken them for objects accidentally left behind by tomb raiders. This discovery immediately raised a series of questions. The Khitan people, the founders of the Liao dynasty, were traditionally nomadic, known for their bold and rugged lifestyle. So how did they come to possess such delicate, sophisticated, and seemingly ahead-of-their-time objects? More importantly, with the technology available 1,000 years ago, how were they able to produce such clear, flawless glassware? Did these cups hold a special meaning for Princess Chen? Or were they symbols of something we still do not fully understand? At the time, all of these questions remained unanswered. It wasn't until later, through more in-depth research, that a plausible explanation emerged. Although the Liao and Song dynasties were often in conflict, the Silk Road continued to operate, connecting China with Western civilizations. This cultural exchange may have introduced advanced glassmaking techniques, contributing to the creation of such ahead-of-their-time objects. Yet even with this explanation, the sense of mystery lingers. Because when looking at these glass cups, we're not just seeing ancient artifacts, we're witnessing a piece of history that challenges our very understanding of the past. The remains of two boys in a 34,000-year-old grave in Russia. You know, our world is always fascinating, especially when it comes to things from the ancient past. Some archaeological discoveries don't just surprise us, they force us to rethink the way we see history entirely. Because sometimes what we assume to be primitive actually reveals a level of sophistication and depth far beyond our imagination. And the story of two boys buried in a 34,000-year-old grave in Russia is a perfect example. Imagine standing in a freezing region near the city of Vladimir, Russia. This area was once part of the Ice Age, a time when humans had to struggle every single day just to survive. And yet, in such a harsh environment, archaeologists uncovered a grave dating back 34,000 years, a number so staggering it leaves people speechless. Inside the grave, they found the remains of two boys, one about 10 years old, the other around 12. But what shocked researchers the most wasn't the age of the burial, it was the way these children were laid to rest. This was no ordinary grave. The two boys were placed inside a long burial chamber, facing each other, their heads positioned close together, as if they were still connected even after death. Surrounding them was not just soil, but what could only be described as a true treasure trove. More than 10,000 small beads made from ivory, carefully arranged, 300 fox teeth, and at least 20 bracelets of various kinds. And that's not all. Researchers also discovered bones of mammoths, deer, and even human remains placed within the chest area of the two boys. After examining and analyzing the skeletons, experts concluded that both boys had died from serious illness. In particular, the 12-year-old appeared to have suffered greatly before his death. Bone analysis suggests he may have been bedridden for a long period, surviving only on soft foods. A short and difficult life, but the way he and the other boy were buried tells a completely different story. After death, their bodies were carefully prepared, adorned with valuable items, and buried with a level of ceremony comparable to that of a king. This raises a major question. Why? To find answers, researchers compared this grave with another burial from the same period, that of a man around 40 years old. The results were even more surprising. The adult's grave was much simpler, with almost none of the luxurious items found with the two children. Researcher Eric Trinkhaus suggested that burial practices for children during this period were entirely different from those for adults. But how exactly they differed and why such a significant contrast existed remains unclear to this day. Some theories propose that the two boys may have belonged to a high-status family within their community. Others suggest that their unusual health conditions may have led to special treatment, perhaps as a sign of respect, or even tied to spiritual beliefs that we still don't fully understand. It's also important to remember that these boys were buried toward the end of the Ice Age. During this time, the climate had begun to warm slightly, making it easier for people to dig graves and carry out more complex burial rituals. This suggests that even in harsh conditions, people of that era placed great importance on death and on honoring the deceased. So who were these two boys? Why were they treated as such extraordinary individuals? And did the items buried with them carry deeper meanings we have yet to uncover? The answers may still lie beneath that frozen ground, waiting to be revealed one day. But one thing is certain. This story shows us that even in the earliest periods of human history, people possessed emotions, beliefs, and ways of expressing care and respect that we are still trying to understand today. 300 Viking skeletons in a single grave reveal a bloody mystery from 1,200 years ago in England. There are places that seem strangely peaceful on the surface, but dig just a few feet underground, and a violent past suddenly comes into sharp focus. In Derbyshire, England, one such discovery has taken archaeologists decades to piece together, fragment by fragment. Here, researchers uncovered a mass grave containing the remains of around 300 individuals. Yes, you heard that right. Not just dozens, but hundreds of skeletons piled on top of one another as if all were tied to a single horrific event. Analysis suggests that these remains date back to the 9th century, and they most likely belong to Viking warriors, men who once spread fear across Europe during the medieval period. Just imagine it, warriors who once dominated the battlefield, now lying silently in a mass burial pit. So what exactly happened to them? As excavations continued, archaeologists found not only human bones, but also a number of accompanying artifacts. Among them were an axe, several knives, and notably, 5 silver coins dated between 872 and 875. These objects act like time markers, helping researchers more precisely determine when these individuals lived and died. But what makes the story even more chilling is the discovery of 4 skeletons with distinctly different characteristics. Experts believe these may have been victims of ritual sacrifice, possibly carried out as part of Viking funeral practices. In other words, when these warriors died, others may have been killed to accompany them into the afterlife. Hearing that sends a chill down your spine, doesn't it? Now let's talk a bit about Repton, the site where these remains were found. Repton is no stranger to history. Before falling into Viking hands, it was an important religious center of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia, a sacred place closely tied to royalty. But everything changed when the Viking army arrived. According to historical records, in 873, Viking forces occupied Repton and turned it into a military stronghold. They even forced the king of Mercia into exile in Paris. This alone shows just how powerful and brutal this force was. It's very possible that during this period, a major battle or deadly event took place, leading to the burial of hundreds of people in a single mass grave. Some of the skeletons were found relatively well preserved, allowing scientists to study age, sex, and even possible causes of death. However, with such a large number of remains, identifying individuals is nearly impossible. Each skeleton represents a story, but together they merge into a single dark chapter of history. What's interesting is that excavations at this site began in the 1980s, and even today, researchers are still analyzing the findings in search of clearer answers. Despite many theories, the ultimate truth still lies hidden somewhere beneath layers of soil and bone. So what do you think really happened at Repton over 1,200 years ago? A brutal battle? A chilling religious ritual? Or perhaps a combination of both? The answer may still be waiting to be uncovered, and who knows, future discoveries might force us to rethink everything we thought we knew about the Vikings. Gold inlaid jewelry in a 1,500-year-old tomb of an ancient beauty. In 2011, a team of experts from the Datong Institute of Archaeology conducted a pre-construction survey in Datong City, Shanxi Province, China. During their inspection, they unexpectedly discovered an ancient tomb buried deep underground. Inside the tomb lay the remains of a woman, carefully placed within a coffin. Her head rested on a lemon-yellow pillow, and inside the pillow were 2 bricks decorated with twisted rope patterns, a small detail, yet one that reflects the meticulous care invested in the burial process. At the entrance of the tomb, a stone inscription clearly read, Han Farong, wife of official Kui Zhen. Her name was known, and part of her identity revealed, but her exact age at the time of death remained a mystery. Based on the tomb structure and the artifacts found within, archaeologists determined that Farong was a noblewoman who lived around 1,500 years ago, during the late Northern Wei dynasty. At that time, Datong served as the imperial capital, an epicenter of power, culture, and luxury in ancient China. But what truly left experts stunned were the pieces of jewelry buried with her. The first to capture attention was a pair of gold earrings. These were not simple designs. They were extraordinarily intricate, featuring a combination of a human face and a coiling dragon motif. The face on the earrings had curly hair, deep-set eyes, and a high nose bridge, features that suggest cultural exchange and influence during that era. Below the shoulders was a lotus design, symbolizing purity, while additional decorations included teardrop-shaped gemstones, connected by fine gold chains and accented with amethyst. Just think about it. 1,500 years ago, with limited technology, how could artisans create such incredibly fine details? Experts say that although many gold earrings from the Northern Wei period have been discovered in recent years, Farong's pair ranks among the most exquisite, nearly unmatched in both complexity and beauty. And it doesn't stop there. Farong was also adorned with a necklace composed of around 5,000 tiny beads. Although the string had decayed over time, the original arrangement of the beads remained intact during excavation, allowing archaeologists to reconstruct the entire piece. Once restored, the necklace revealed itself as a true work of art. It included 10 gold beads of varying sizes, 9 gold plaques, 2 crystal beads, 42 pearls, and more than 4,800 tiny glass beads in blue and black, each no larger than a grain of millet. Just hearing those numbers is overwhelming, isn't it? Every small detail came together to form a perfect whole, demonstrating not only immense wealth, but also the refined aesthetic sense and advanced craftsmanship of that era. In addition to Farong's tomb, archaeologists discovered 2 other nearby graves, suggesting that this area once served as a burial ground for the elite. Yet among them all, Farong's tomb stood out the most, not only for its remarkable state of preservation, but also for the deeply personal character reflected in her jewelry. Unfortunately, to this day, many questions remain unanswered. Who was Farong truly? What was her life like? And why were such intricately crafted pieces created specifically to be buried with her? For now, those answers remain just out of reach. 13,000-year-old remains reveal a secret about the origins of Native Americans. You know, our world is already full of mysteries, but in the ancient world, there are enigmas far more difficult to comprehend. Some secrets of history aren't found in books, they lie deep beneath the earth, even at the bottom of cold, dark waters, places no one would ever expect. And the story of a girl named Naya is one of those mysteries. A discovery that not only sends chills down your spine, but also shakes what we once believed about the origins of humans in the Americas. It all began with what seemed like a routine expedition in the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. This region is known for its vast, water-filled cave systems, some so deep that even light seems to give up. And inside one of those caves, at a depth of about 138 feet below the water's surface, scientists came across something they never expected. an almost perfectly preserved human skeleton. As mentioned earlier, it didn't belong to a warrior or an adult, but to a teenage girl, around 15 to 16 years old. After the discovery, researchers named her Naya, meaning water nymph in Greek, a name that sounds both gentle and mysterious, much like the way she emerged after tens of thousands of years lost to time. But what truly haunts people is this: how could a young girl end up in such a deep and dangerous place? The answer slowly came into focus as scientists began analyzing the site. They realized that tens of thousands of years ago, this cave was completely dry. It may have even been an open pit on the surface, and at some point, perhaps in a single careless moment, Naya fell in. A fatal fall. Evidence on her skeleton shows that her pelvis was severely fractured, indicating an extremely violent impact. According to experts, death likely came almost instantly, with no chance of survival. Yet what makes this story even more eerie is that Naya was not the only one trapped there. Around her, scientists discovered the remains of at least 26 large animal species, including saber-toothed cats and giant ground sloths, creatures that have long since vanished from the earth. Their bones were scattered throughout the cave, like a natural trap that no living being could escape once it fell in. As time passed, the earth entered a period of warming. Massive ice sheets melted, sea levels rose, and the once dry pit was completely submerged, turning into a deep underwater cave between about 9,700 and 10,200 years ago. This still, undisturbed aquatic environment unintentionally preserved everything inside, including Naya's remains, until the present day. But if this were only an archaeological discovery, it might not have caused such a sensation. What truly unsettled scientists was her face. When researchers analyzed her skull, they noticed something remarkable. Naya had features similar to ancient Native Americans: narrow facial structure, large eye sockets, a prominent forehead, and slightly protruding teeth. However, these traits differ significantly from modern Native Americans, who typically have broader, rounder skulls. This raises a profound question: have humans changed over time? Or is our origin more complex than we once believed? Based on the data collected, scientists proposed a compelling hypothesis. Naya may be a descendant of ancient populations who migrated from Northeast Asia between 18,000 and 26,000 years ago. These early humans are believed to have crossed a land bridge that once connected Siberia and North America, what we now call the Bering Land Bridge, or Beringia. In the harsh conditions of the prehistoric world, without technology, without modern transportation, they still managed to travel thousands of miles in search of new lands. This was not just migration, it was a raw, instinct-driven journey for survival. What's striking is that this discovery challenges many earlier theories. In the past, some researchers believed that the ancestors of Native Americans may have come from Europe, Southeast Asia, or even Oceania. But Naya, the girl who lay silent for 13,000 years, is telling a different story, one that leads back to Asia. Today, scientists continue to study Naya's nuclear DNA, the genetic material inherited from both parents. This could be the final key to determining exactly where she came from, and more broadly, to unlocking the journey of the first humans who set foot in the Americas. Hopefully, in the near future, we will have a definitive answer. You see, a small set of bones carrying an enormous secret. Fascinating, isn't it? So what do you think? Could Naya be the missing piece that finally helps us understand human history? Or are there still mysteries out there that we have yet to uncover? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below so we can explore this together. 1,168-ton stone abandoned for 3,500 years. Even the ancient Egyptians were stumped. What would you think if there were a colossal structure created by one of the most famous ancient civilizations in the world, but left unfinished, lying dormant for 3,500 years, never to be completed? Hard to believe, right? But my friends, this is a real story that exists right in the heart of the Egyptian desert. Hidden in a quarry in the city of Aswan, southern Egypt, there lies a massive granite block that at first glance might seem like an ordinary stone, but it isn't. This is the unfinished obelisk, one of the most important archaeological discoveries that reveals secrets about how the ancient Egyptians built their monuments. The story of this stone begins around 3,500 years ago, during the reign of Pharaoh Hatshepsut, one of the very few female rulers of ancient Egypt. She ordered the construction of a gigantic obelisk, intended as a monumental addition to other great works. If completed, it would have been the largest obelisk ever created. This stone weighs an astonishing 1,168 tons and measures approximately 138 feet in height, numbers that would impress even today. To put that into perspective, it's even larger than many famous monuments. For example, the Lateran obelisk in Rome, the tallest obelisk ever erected, reaches about 150 feet including its base, while its main shaft is significantly shorter. So, what stopped this grand project from ever being completed? The answer lies right on the surface of the stone itself. Upon closer examination, archaeologists discovered large cracks running along the length of the granite, evidence of an accident during its creation. These cracks were so severe that the entire structure could no longer be safely erected as a monument. And so, instead of continuing, the ancient Egyptians abandoned the project. The stone still lies there, attached to the bedrock, as if time had frozen the moment they stopped. Interestingly, this very unfinished state has become an invaluable resource for future generations. For the first time, scientists could see how the ancient Egyptians carved and shaped such a massive stone. On its granite surface, the chisel marks are still visible, along with grooves made using rudimentary tools. Even red lines, like modern-day pencil marks, were discovered, indicating where cuts were planned. Isn't it remarkable? A civilization from thousands of years ago, yet their methods show surprising similarities to modern techniques. But the bigger question remains. If the stone hadn't cracked, how would they have moved a 1,168-ton block? Many experts believe the Egyptians had incredibly clever methods. They may have placed the obelisk on large sledges and dragged it to the Nile by human power. Then, it could be loaded onto boats and transported along the river to its destination. Once there, they could use natural ramps or construct earthen inclines to lift the obelisk. Slowly, using a system of ropes and pulleys, they would lower it in a way that allowed it to gradually stand upright. Sounds unbelievable, right? But remember, these are the same people who built the Great Pyramids, structures that continue to awe the modern world. So, handling a 1,168-ton stone wouldn't have been impossible. It's just that this time, they never had the chance to finish it. Perhaps it is precisely this incompleteness that makes the unfinished obelisk one of the most vivid testaments to both the skill and the limits of the ancient Egyptians. A monument never erected yet standing in history for 3,500 years. Truly extraordinary, don't you think? More than 240 skeletons buried beneath a department store surface after 100 years. Have you ever imagined that a place once bustling with people, where shoppers walked, chatted, and laughed for over a century, could be lying on top of an ancient cemetery, hiding hundreds of skeletons beneath it? Probably not, right? But life is full of surprises, because exactly such a story has just been revealed by archaeologists at a building called Aki White, once a famous department store in the town of Haverfordwest in Pembrokeshire, southwest Wales. For more than 100 years, this building served as a familiar shopping hub for local residents until it officially closed in 2013. And from that moment on, no one expected that beneath its foundation lay a secret buried for centuries. When archaeologists began excavating the area, they quickly realized this was no ordinary site. As layers of soil were removed, the first skeletons began to appear. Not just one or even a few dozen, but more than 240 skeletons lying close together across a large space, like a forgotten ancient cemetery. What makes the discovery even more haunting is that nearly half of the remains belong to children. Imagine the stories behind such a tragic number. Researchers suggest that this reflects the high mortality rates of the Middle Ages, when disease, harsh living conditions, and warfare constantly threatened people, especially children who hadn't yet reached adulthood. But the story doesn't stop there. As the analysis continued, archaeologists discovered several skeletons with injuries to the skull. These wounds were not accidental, but likely the result of combat. Some marks suggest they could have been caused by arrows or even bullets, a detail that drew particular attention from experts. Who were these people, and why were they buried here? One theory links the remains to a major historical event in 1405, during an uprising led by Owain Glyndwr, the last Prince of Wales. This revolt combined Welsh forces with French rebels to resist English occupation. It's possible that those buried here were victims of that bloody conflict. Interestingly, this burial area wasn't reserved for any single social class. According to Andrew Shawbrook, supervising archaeologist from the Dyfed Archaeological Trust, it was once a prestigious cemetery where both wealthy and ordinary townspeople could be laid to rest. Further investigation revealed that this entire area was once part of St. Saviour's Priory, founded around 1256. Beyond its religious function, the priory was a large complex that included dormitories, common rooms, scriptoriums, a hospital, and stables. In other words, it was an important community center during the Middle Ages. Over time, the cemetery may have been in continuous use until the early 18th century, before being forgotten and gradually covered by modern developments, including the Aki White department store. In addition to the skeletons, the excavation team discovered many other artifacts, such as ancient bricks and related objects, all of which are being carefully cleaned and preserved for future study. For archaeologists, this discovery is more than just a dig, it is a doorway into the past. As archaeologist Gabby Lester shared, she never imagined she would participate in such a significant find. Indeed, beneath what seemed like an ordinary store lies a hidden chapter of history, telling stories of war, disease, and human life hundreds of years ago. So think about it, how many places in the world that we pass by every day might be hiding secrets no one has ever known? I'd say quite a few, and sometimes perhaps even right beneath your feet without you ever realizing it. 50,000-year-old bison mummy dug up, and what scientists did next shocked everyone. In the frozen lands of Alaska, where snow and ice cover the ground year-round, some things thought to be forever asleep beneath the earth suddenly return one day, bringing stories no one could have imagined. The tale of a 50,000-year-old bison mummy is a perfect example of this. This story begins during the Klondike Gold Rush in the late 1890s, one of the biggest gold rushes in North America. Over 100,000 people from all over flocked to Alaska and Northwest Canada, hoping to strike it rich overnight. But not everyone was lucky. Some became wealthy quickly, but most left empty-handed, leaving behind landscapes endlessly dug and disturbed. Many years later, in 1979, after the gold rush had subsided and the crowds were gone, gold miners in the Alaskan tundra accidentally stumbled upon a different kind of treasure. This time it wasn't gold. It was the mummy of a steppe-ichip bison, preserved almost perfectly in permafrost. The mummy was later named Blue Babe, a name both unusual and intriguing, and is the only known example of a bison priscus from the Pleistocene epoch. The discovery was reported to Professor Dale Guthrie, an archaeology expert at the University of Alaska. But removing Blue Babe from the ice was no simple task. It took 3 years for the research team to fully excavate and free the giant animal from the permafrost. Initially, radiocarbon dating suggested the bison had died around 36,000 years ago. Later studies revealed an even more astonishing number: 50,000 years old. A closer examination revealed multiple injuries on Blue Babe's body, particularly on its neck and back. Scientists believe these wounds were caused by an ancient predator, the American lion, a branch of lions that went extinct during the Ice Age. It seems the bison was attacked during winter, possibly trying to escape but ultimately succumbing to the harsh cold. The extremely low temperatures and thick ice were crucial in preserving the mummy until its excavation in 1979. But the story doesn't end there. Once removed from the ice, the mummy began to show signs of decay. Scientists knew that without immediate action, this invaluable specimen could be lost. They separated parts such as the meat and marrow for study, while preserving the rest for museum display. Then, in a move no one expected, the research team, with the help of taxidermy expert Eric Grankvist, decided to cook a portion of the 50,000-year-old bison meat. They prepared it as a stew with vegetables and other ingredients, just like a normal meal. According to Professor Dale, the smell of the thawed meat was distinctive, somewhat like beef with a hint of mushrooms. The flavor, he described, was slightly chewy, but still beef-like, and not too bad. More than 10 people participated in this extraordinary meal, and remarkably, no one experienced any health issues afterward. Today, Blue Babe is on display at the University of Alaska Museum of the North. One of the most unique specimens visitors can see, an ancient bison perished in a frozen winter, and a story that no one could have predicted. something preserved for tens of thousands of years became a modern human dinner. Fascinating, isn't it? So, if you ever had the chance, would you dare to try a bite of 50,000-year-old meat like they did? The 252-mile-long Forgotten Wall of Mongolia. There are some of humanity's most famous monumental constructions that everyone knows about, like the Great Wall of China, but there are also mysterious stretches of wall, hundreds of miles long, existing right alongside them that hardly anyone talks about. Strangely enough, the more researchers study it, the less they understand its purpose. This is exactly what has been discovered in the frigid lands of northeastern Mongolia, where winter temperatures can drop to -13 degrees Fahrenheit. Here lies an ancient wall over 252 miles long. Locals call it the Mongol Ark because rather than running straight, it curves like a giant bow, following the border region between Mongolia and China. At first glance, it may seem like just another part of the Great Wall, but what has puzzled researchers is that they are not sure who built it, when it was constructed, or what its primary purpose was. The story begins when scientists conducted the first detailed analysis of this wall. Despite its hundreds of miles in length, it had been almost entirely forgotten in academic records. Few clear documents existed, and there was no precise dating. Only fragmented information suggesting construction sometime between the 11th and 13th centuries. To unravel the mystery, a research team from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem combined every possible method: satellite imagery, old maps from China and the Soviet Union, and on-site field surveys. The more they investigated, the more they realized this was far from a typical defensive wall. The structure was not just a wall. It included trenches and 34 different structures resembling outposts or checkpoints and featured many large gaps. Consider this. If the purpose were to stop invading enemies, would it make sense to leave so many holes? This led researchers to a fascinating hypothesis. They suggest the Mongol Ark may have been built hastily during the late Jin dynasty around the 12th to 13th centuries when Mongol forces were expanding and threatening the region. Under urgent circumstances, a rapid defensive system might have been erected, but it wasn't fully reinforced. However, another issue arose. Even the positions believed to be watchtowers, places that should have offered a good vantage point, were located in less than ideal spots, with limited visibility, reducing their effectiveness for defense. This casts doubt on the military wall theory. So if it wasn't built to fight invaders, what was it for? Another hypothesis, less glorious but more plausible, has emerged. The wall may have been constructed to control the movement of people and livestock. In simpler terms, it could have functioned as an ancient, soft border system, managing traffic, collecting taxes, or overseeing resources. Viewed this way, the large gaps make sense. The goal wasn't to completely block passage, but to monitor and control it. Watchtowers didn't need extreme height, only enough to oversee key routes. Which theory seems more reasonable to you? A hastily built defensive wall to resist Mongol invaders, or a system to control people and livestock during turbulent times? I lean toward the second theory, but honestly, even today, no one has a definitive answer. What we have are just traces, segments of wall quietly stretching across the vast steppe, enduring bitter winds and centuries of time. 2,200-year-old shipwreck discovered in a sunken city beneath the sea. Beneath the deep blue waters off the coast of Egypt, an international team of archaeologists has announced the discovery of an ancient Egyptian shipwreck dating back approximately 2,200 years, buried on the seabed of Thonis-Heracleion, a once glorious city now lost beneath the Mediterranean Sea. This discovery not only sheds light on ancient shipbuilding techniques, but also opens a window into the lost world of a vibrant civilization that once thrived at the mouth of the Nile. For the Egyptians, the city was known as Thonis, while the Greeks called it Heracleion. It was a bustling hub of commerce and religion, yet today, only its ruins lie quietly beneath sand and sea, swallowed by a series of earthquakes and geological upheavals about a millennium ago. Among the newly uncovered treasures, the shipwreck measures approximately 82 feet in length, built in the distinctive style of Nile River craft, featuring a large sail and the capability for high speed. According to the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, which led the excavation, The ship likely met its fate after striking massive fallen stones from the nearby Temple of Amun, the region's most important religious site at the time. Remarkably, the ship was found just 16 feet from the temple, buried deep under layers of clay and debris, suggesting it sank almost simultaneously with the natural disaster thought to be a catastrophic flood in the 2nd century BCE. Frank Goddio, veteran archaeologist and president of the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology, stated, "Shipwrecks from this period are extremely rare. What makes this vessel extraordinary is its mortise and tenon construction, a highly advanced technique allowing wooden planks to be precisely fitted together without nails or adhesives. The structure is like the pieces of a modern puzzle, yet it was handcrafted over 2 millennia ago. This technique helped the ship retain a relatively intact form despite centuries buried beneath the sea. But the shipwreck was not the only discovery at Thonis-Heracleion. In the same area, archaeologists uncovered a tomb dating back 2,400 years, revealing additional layers of culture and religious practice. Inside, they found elaborately decorated pottery, including a shard painted with ocean waves, illustrating the intimate relationship between the people and the sea. Notably, a golden amulet depicting the god Bes, protector of women during childbirth and of newborns, was also found. In ancient Egyptian culture, Bes symbolized protection and faith in life during its most fragile moments, showing that spiritual beliefs coexisted alongside everyday life, even in times of great upheaval. Thonis-Heracleion was one of the great legends of ancient Egypt, frequently mentioned in Greek texts as a busy international port where Egyptian and Greek cultures intertwined. The city served as a gateway to inland Egypt, attracting kings, merchants, and religious devotees. Eventually, a series of earthquakes and subsidence events submerged the entire city between the 8th and 2nd centuries CE. What remains today are fragments of a once brilliant civilization, enough to tell a dramatic story of prosperity and tragic collapse. And now, as modern vessels of the archaeological team traverse the waters where the city once thrived, they bring not just diving gear, scanners, and recovery nets, but a mission: to awaken memories buried beneath the sea, connecting past and present, and inspiring profound respect for the achievements of our ancestors. A ship, a temple, a statue, a shard of pottery, each piece is a remnant of history. When pieced together, they tell the story of a city that once lived, breathed, and shone brightly beneath the waves. The world's longest meteorite field. Stretching across the vast remote lands of the Xinjiang Autonomous Region in China, reaching all the way to the borders of Mongolia and Kazakhstan, lies a mysterious field that extends for an astonishing 267 miles, known as the longest meteorite field ever recorded. Scattered across this expanse are rocks from outer space, remnants of a massive collision that occurred thousands, even millions of years ago. Some fragments weigh only a few dozen kilograms, but others reach 20 to 28 tons, leaving anyone seeing them for the first time completely awestruck. These stones are the remnants of an asteroid named Alatai, believed to have weighed over 200 tons when it entered Earth's atmosphere, creating an intense thermal shock and exploding into countless fragments across the Altai region in western China. The impact left not only a dramatic physical trace, but also turned the area into a magnet for both researchers and fortune seekers, meteorite hunters eager to strike it rich. Remarkably, scientists note that few meteorite fields have fragments so widely dispersed. Typically, child meteorites from a parent asteroid's explosion scatter within a 19 to 25-mile radius, but here, the fragments spread over hundreds of miles, making the Altai meteorite field unique and challenging conventional knowledge of meteorites. To date, more than 74 tons of Alatai meteorites have been recovered, and the hunt continues due to the area's immense potential. The largest fragment, an enormous 28-ton boulder, was discovered by a Chinese farmer in 1898 and remains a historical marker of that cosmic collision. Beyond the breathtaking and rugged landscape, countless dramatic stories unfold of meteorite hunters who roam day and night, hoping for life-changing discoveries. One such hunter is Zhang Bo, a man from Shanghai whose fascination began after witnessing a fiery meteor blaze across the southern Chinese sky in 2009. From that moment, he devoted himself to studying meteorites, eventually leaving his daily job to become a professional hunter. Armed with only an off-road vehicle, maps, and a metal detector, Zhang navigates harsh mountains and arid deserts, places where only the brave and patient dare to tread. In 2016, upon learning of a new meteorite site in Altai, he immediately embarked on a 2-week expedition crossing into Mongolia and Kazakhstan. While he does not disclose exact earnings, he admits to having VIP clients willing to pay anywhere from $100,000 to millions for rare meteorites. Meteorites hold value not only for science, they contain rare elements that can provide invaluable insights into the formation of the solar system, but also spiritual significance. Many are purchased as talismans for luck, protection, or status. Some have even sold at top global auction houses. Notably, in February 2019, Christie's in the UK sold a meteorite slab for a staggering $800,000. Yet the life of a meteorite hunter is far from glamorous. Success is uncertain, risks are high, nature is harsh, competition is fierce, and legal obstacles abound. Many spend weeks or months in freezing deserts or high mountains with nothing to show, but a single find can change a life forever. According to NASA, roughly 44 tons of meteorites fall to Earth daily, though most burn up in the atmosphere. Only a small fraction survives to reach the ground, precisely what thousands of hunters worldwide are seeking. The Altai meteorite field is no longer just a scientific curiosity. It symbolizes human ambition, a relentless pursuit of cosmic treasure. These fallen stones tell not only the story of an asteroid explosion thousands of years ago, but also the inspiring story of ordinary people daring to reach for the universe against all odds. Ancient Roman Spa reveals secrets of Pompeii's elite. Hidden beneath nearly 2 millennia of thick volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius, the ancient city of Pompeii continues to astonish the world with the secrets revealed layer by layer. The latest excavation in Region 9, one of Pompeii's most significant archaeological zones, has brought scientists closer than ever to understanding the lavish lifestyle of the city's elite. The story begins inside an ordinary-looking residence where archaeologists discovered a remarkably grand private spa complex, a space not merely for bathing and relaxation, but also a stage for displaying the power and status of Pompeii's upper-class homeowners. According to a January 17, 2025, report from the Pompei Archaeological Park, the complex includes the classic architectural features of a Roman bath, a caldarium, hot room, tepidarium, warm room, frigidarium, cold room, and a spacious changing room with benches for guests. Notably, the cold room is a roofed courtyard measuring 33 by 33 feet, featuring a large pool at its center. This design served not only for cooling, but also as a striking visual centerpiece, carefully arranged to evoke the image of a Greek-style gymnasium, a common feature in luxurious Roman villas where culture, physical fitness, and authority intertwined. The spa's significance extends beyond architecture. It was directly connected to a lavish banquet hall, decorated with black background frescoes, a style used to enhance contrast with brightly colored details, creating an air of mystery and sophistication. Here, sumptuous feasts would unfold, filled with ritualized social interactions, where every step and gaze of the host was part of a carefully orchestrated social performance. Gabriel Zuchtriegel, director of the Archaeological Park, described the complex as a theatrical production with the homeowner as the central star, each detail designed to enhance his personal image and social standing. The scene evokes the famous opening of the Satyricon by Gaius Petronius Arbiter, a 1st-century satirical Roman novel, in which Trimalchio, a wealthy newcomer, invites guests to his home, beginning with shared relaxation in the baths, followed by extravagant ceremonial entertaining. Owning a private spa, therefore, was more than a display of wealth. It was a tool for showcasing culture and personal power to society. That this spa was found within a private home, rather than a villa or public facility, highlights just how opulent some individuals in Pompeii could be. It confirms that the house belonged to someone of exceptional social status, possessing both economic means and the ambition to cultivate a respected and admired public image. Bathing, relaxation, and entertaining. Here were not purely personal activities, but ritualized social events, reinforcing and asserting social hierarchy. This discovery is part of ongoing excavations in Region 9, an area completely buried during Vesuvius's catastrophic eruption in 79 AD. Alongside the spa, archaeologists have uncovered a bakery, a house under renovation, and multiple rooms adorned with intricate frescoes. These finds provide a vivid glimpse into the daily life of Pompei's residents, while illustrating the social stratification and refined cultural practices of ancient Rome, where even a bath or a banquet could serve as a means to demonstrate authority. More than 2,000 years after Pompei was buried, every stone, fresco, and ancient pool silently tells stories of a world both magnificent and decadent, where power, artistry, and luxury converged within living spaces. Discoveries like this mysterious spa invite us once again into that world, a world that has vanished physically but remains alive in human imagination. Fascinating, isn't it? $90,000-year-old knife made from animal bone. Nearly 100,000 years ago, when humans still lived in caves with no metals and no machinery, what do you think they were capable of making? A sharpened stone? A hunting club? Or just crude tools for survival? Up until recently, all those ideas might have seemed correct. But a discovery in Morocco has forced everyone to rethink. In a cave along the northern coast near the Atlantic Ocean, archaeologists uncovered a small object, but its significance is anything but small. It's a knife about 5 inches long, made entirely from animal bone. At first glance, it might seem ordinary, but what stunned scientists is its age, approximately 90,000 years old. Yes, you read that correctly, a 90,000-year-old knife. Even more astonishing is how it was crafted. This is not a roughly chipped fragment or a sharpened bone by chance. It is a purposefully made tool, with a clear shape, a polished cutting edge, and precise finishing. Researchers believe the knife was likely made from the rib bone of a large mammal living at that time. Transforming a bone into such a sharp tool required not just strength, but also technique, dexterity, and design thinking. That is what makes this discovery so extraordinary. Professor Bouzugar, head of the research team at the National Institute of Archaeology in Morocco, explained that this find is fundamentally changing what we thought about the capabilities of early humans. Previously, many assumed that sophisticated tool-making appeared much later. But this knife shows that such skills existed at least 40,000 years earlier than previously believed. The knife is associated with the Aterian culture, a North African Stone Age culture famous for its stone tool technology. What sets this knife apart is that, unlike most tools from the same culture made of stone, it is made from bone, and it is far more refined. This suggests that ancient populations in North Africa may have developed advanced material working skills beyond those of other contemporary groups, especially those living south of the Sahara Desert. According to Dr. Sylvia Bello from the Natural History Museum in London, this knife provides clear evidence that humans knew how to craft sophisticated bone tools as early as 100,000 years ago. This was not accidental. It reflects a fully developed system of skills. Based on its shape and edge angles, scientists believe the knife was used to cut soft, elastic materials, possibly animal hides, meat, or certain plants. Simple as it may sound, using it required knowledge of hand pressure, cutting angles, and blade sharpness. This demonstrates that early humans not only knew how to make tools, but also how to use them expertly. A small tool, yes, but it reflects the cognitive abilities, dexterity, and intellectual sophistication of humans nearly 100,000 years ago. What does this mean? Our ancestors, early Homo sapiens, were likely far more intelligent and refined than we had imagined. So, you see, the initial assumption is correct. Ancient humans did not only create crude tools, they were capable of extraordinary skill and ingenuity, far beyond what most of us might think. A 3,000-year-old skeleton with 800 bite marks, terrifying evidence of a shark attack. At an archaeological site called Tsukumo Shell, near Japan's Seto Inland Sea, scientists came across a skeleton that left them stunned at first sight, not because it was ancient, but because it bore nearly 800 wounds. Yes, you read that right, nearly 800 bites and deep cuts scattered across the body, from the arms and legs to the chest and abdomen. And the striking detail? There's no evidence that any of these injuries had healed. Everything happened in a very short time. A swift, relentless attack that left the victim almost no chance to survive. Initially, archaeologists like J. Alyssa White and Rick Schultz were completely puzzled. They considered every possibility. Could this have been a human conflict? Or the attack of a terrestrial predator? Maybe even scavenging by animals after death? One by one, these hypotheses were eliminated. The wounds were curved, sharp, and serrated. something that Stone Age tools could not produce. Their distribution also didn't match any land predator. Slowly, a terrifying yet logical conclusion emerged. The bites were made by a shark. To confirm this, the team consulted George Burgess, a marine biologist with the Florida Museum of Natural History's Shark Research Program. They compared each wound to data from modern shark attacks, and the match was nearly perfect. This man, referred to as Tsukumo number 24, had been the victim of a shark attack and likely represents the oldest known shark attack in archaeological history. Based on the bite patterns, scientists believe the predator was most likely a tiger shark or a great white shark, two of the ocean's most fearsome hunters. However, because the bites overlap so extensively, the exact species cannot be confirmed. Even more chilling was the condition of the body. The man's left arm and right leg were completely missing, and the remaining leg had been repositioned on the body during burial, indicating severe mutilation before the corpse was brought ashore. Analysis shows he lived between 1370 and 1010 BCE, likely in his youth to middle age when he died. Researchers speculate he was fishing with others when the attack occurred, a single careless moment and everything ended. With such dense bites, particularly around the thighs, major arteries were likely severed almost instantly, leading to rapid blood loss and death in mere minutes. But one detail softens the horror slightly. He was not abandoned at sea. The body was carefully brought back and buried in the community cemetery. This shows that even in harsh times, humans cared for one another and respected each other until the very end. This discovery is more than a grisly story. It's a stark reminder that thousands of years ago, humans faced the perils of nature, especially the ocean, where we were not always the top predator. So imagine stepping into those waters back then with no large boats or protective gear, knowing that beneath the waves lurked predators like this. If it were me, I certainly wouldn't dare. The sea is truly terrifying. The DNA of the Tollund Man mummy and his last meal reveal a chilling ritual from 2,400 years ago. Now try to imagine this scene. On an ordinary morning, while digging peat for fuel in the cold, desolate marshlands of northern Europe, a human face suddenly appears. Not a dry, decaying skeleton, nor fragments that have crumbled away with time, but a face almost perfectly preserved, with darkened skin, closed eyes, and an eerily calm expression. If it were you, would you dare to come closer? Probably not, right? And in this case, it was no different. A Danish family who made the discovery did not dare approach. What they had found was the Tollund Man. This story begins in the mid-1950s when a Danish family accidentally discovered the body. Seeing how incredibly well preserved it was, they immediately believed it to be the victim of a recent murder. And that's understandable, because from the hair and skin to every detail of the face, everything made it seem as though the man had died only a few days earlier. However, they only dared to observe from a distance. It wasn't until scientists were called in to examine and analyze the body carefully that the truth slowly began to unfold, and what they discovered was even more shocking than any initial theory the family had imagined. The analysis revealed that the man had died more than 2,400 years ago, not the victim of a recent crime. Scientists later named him Tollund Man, after the village where his body was found. From that moment on, one of the strangest archaeological mysteries in the world officially began. Take a closer look at Tollund Man's face. There are no signs of panic, no trace of pain, no indication of struggle. Instead, there is an almost unbelievable sense of peace. Some experts have even said, he looks as if he is sleeping and could wake up at any moment, but the reality is quite the opposite. The rope still tightly wrapped around his neck revealed the cause of death. He had been hanged. And the question that puzzled researchers for years was this: was it murder or an ancient ritual sacrifice? The deeper the analysis went, the clearer and more unsettling the answer became. Based on dating, Tollund Man lived around 405 to 380 BC during the early Iron Age in Denmark. At that time, human sacrifice was not unheard of. But what's strange is that after being hanged, his body was not cremated or buried according to normal customs. Instead, he was carefully placed into a peat bog. But why a bog? That question still has no definitive answer. What we do know is that peat bogs have extremely acidic conditions, almost no oxygen, and very low nutrient levels. This environment makes it nearly impossible for microorganisms, the agents of decomposition, to survive. Ironically, these harsh conditions turned the bog into a perfect natural coffin. As a result, after thousands of years, Tollund Man's body remained remarkably intact, from his skin and internal organs to even his last meal. And this is the part that truly gives people chills. Scientists analyzed the contents of Tollund Man's intestines and discovered that just before his death, he had eaten a thick porridge. It sounds ordinary, right? But upon closer examination, they found that this porridge was made from barley, flax seeds, various wild seeds, and even a small amount of fish, something quite rare in the diet of that region at the time. But that's not all. His intestines also contained parasite eggs, including whipworm and tapeworm. This suggests that his food may not have been thoroughly cooked or that the water source was contaminated. It may seem like a small detail, but it actually opens up a much larger hypothesis. What if this wasn't just a normal meal? What if it was part of a ritual? Some researchers believe that before being hanged, Tollund Man may have been given a ceremonial meal, possibly intended to purify him or prepare him for the journey into the afterlife. Notably, the calm expression on his face seems to support this theory. But then another question arises. Did he know his fate in advance? Did he accept it as part of his religious beliefs? Or are these merely assumptions made by us, modern humans? Modern DNA analysis technology has been, and continues to be, used to learn more about his origins, diet, and even his health before death. However, many questions remain unanswered. So far, we have only uncovered a small fraction of the mysteries Tollund Man left behind. What we do know is this: he did not die an ordinary death. He may have been sacrificed, killed in a painful way by hanging, after consuming a carefully prepared meal for his journey to the next world. And to this day, Tollund Man continues to puzzle scientists. So what about you? If you stood before a man who had lain beneath the bog for more than 2,000 years, yet still looked as if he were peacefully asleep, would you see it as a miracle of nature, or as a chilling reminder of ancient rituals we still don't fully understand? As for me, I believe Tollund Man is not just an archaeological discovery, but a doorway into the spiritual world, the beliefs, and the deepest secrets of ancient humanity. Does anyone else feel the same way? If you do, leave a comment below so we can discuss this fascinating mummy together. A 14,000-year-old puppy mummy reveals a shocking truth from the Ice Age. Hey my friend, what if I told you there's a land covered in ice, where temperatures stay far below freezing, the wind howls with bone-chilling force, and beneath that frozen ground, there are creatures that have slept for tens of thousands of years, waiting to be discovered by humans? What would you think? Would you believe it's real or just a piece of science fiction? Probably the second one, right? But here's the truth. This is absolutely real, and it happened in the frozen region of Siberia. Back in 2011 and 2015, archaeologists discovered two remarkably well-preserved puppy mummies buried deep in permafrost about 25 miles from the village of Tumat in Yakutia, Russia. These remains were estimated to be around 14,000 years old. What shocked researchers wasn't just their age, but their incredible state of preservation. Their skin, fur, and overall features were still almost intact, as if they had only fallen asleep not long ago. Doesn't it send chills down your spine standing before a creature from the end of the Ice Age that still looks so fresh? At first, scientists believed these were ancient domesticated dogs, possibly some of the earliest evidence of humans taming dogs. They even gave them a familiar name, the Tumat puppies. Everything seemed to make sense until new discoveries began to take the story in a completely different direction. In the same layer of permafrost where the puppies were found, archaeologists also uncovered the bones of a woolly mammoth, a massive animal that once dominated the Ice Age. Even more intriguing, these bones showed clear signs of human activity, suggesting the mammoth had been hunted and butchered. At that point, a fascinating theory emerged. Ancient humans had hunted the mammoth, and these two puppies may have been nearby, waiting for scraps, just like the relationship between humans and dogs today. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But once again, science forced everyone to rethink. A research team from the University of York in Canada decided to dig deeper by analyzing DNA and biological samples taken from the intestines, teeth, bones, and preserved tissues of the two mummies. Their goal was simple: to determine whether the animals had actually eaten mammoth meat. The results completely contradicted earlier assumptions. There was no trace of mammoth meat in their stomachs. So what does that mean? It suggests that the puppies and the mammoth remains may have simply ended up in the same location by coincidence, with no direct connection at all. And from there, a new and even more surprising theory began to take shape. These puppies might not have been domesticated dogs at all. Genetic analysis revealed that they were likely siblings belonging to a species of wild wolves and had never been domesticated by humans. In other words, they were not human companions, but independent wild animals surviving in the harsh conditions of the Ice Age. What do you think about that? A belief that once seemed so certain completely overturned by scientific analysis. It's hard to wrap your head around, isn't it? But that's not the end of the story. What surprised researchers even more was the animals' last meal. Inside their stomachs, scientists found undigested tissue from a woolly rhinoceros, a large, powerful, and extremely dangerous animal of that time. Now that raises a big question. How could young wolves possibly hunt such a massive creature? The answer likely lies in the Ice Age environment itself. Scientists believe wolves from that era were larger and much stronger than modern wolves. A pack of adult wolves could have worked together to take down a woolly rhinoceros, and the young would have fed afterward. But that's not all. Their stomach contents also included plant material. This suggests that the diet of ancient wolves was more diverse than we once thought, not just hunting prey, but also consuming plants to survive in extreme conditions. The more we learn, the more the story of these two tiny mummies opens up a much larger picture of the world 14,000 years ago, a time when humans, wolves, mammoths, and woolly rhinoceroses coexisted, hunted, survived, and eventually disappeared into history. You see, sometimes discoveries that seem small, like two puppies, can completely change the way we understand the past. And honestly, isn't that fascinating? 5,700-year-old piece of chewing gum reveals the face of a beautiful Stone Age girl. Can you believe that from a single piece of chewing gum spit out nearly 6,000 years ago, scientists can reconstruct the face of a person who disappeared from this world long ago? It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, doesn't it? But this story is completely real, not something imagined from a script. To better understand it, let's travel back about 5,700 years to a coastal marshland on the island of Lolland in southern Denmark. Back then, in a wild and untouched landscape, a young girl with blue eyes, dark hair, and brown skin typical of European hunter-gatherers left behind a tiny trace of her existence. She spit out a piece of birch bark resin she had been chewing. Yes, just a small detail, a completely ordinary action, nothing remarkable at all. But she could never have imagined that this simple moment would freeze a part of her life for thousands of years. Nearly 6,000 years later, archaeologists from the Lolland Falster Museum discovered this unusual piece of gum, preserved almost perfectly in the marshy mud. Of course, this wasn't chewing gum in the modern sense. As mentioned earlier, it was birch bark resin, a substance created by heating tree bark, commonly used by prehistoric people as an adhesive or simply something to chew. When scientists examined the resin closely, they noticed clear tooth imprints on its surface, undeniable evidence that it had been chewed. But what truly surprised them was hidden deep inside. Using modern DNA analysis technology, they were able to extract genetic material directly from the resin. From that, a biological profile of the girl began to emerge. She was female. She belonged to a group of ancient European hunter-gatherers. Not only that, her DNA revealed she had blue eyes, dark hair, and brown skin, a combination of traits characteristic of people from that era. And that's not all. This piece of chewing gum acted like a true time capsule. It preserved traces of what she had eaten before. The results showed that her most recent meal included hazelnuts and wild duck. You see, from such a tiny fragment, scientists were able to reconstruct a meal from thousands of years ago. But the story goes even further. Inside this sample, researchers also found traces of her oral microbiome, even pathogens. Among them was the Epstein-Barr virus, a common virus associated with various illnesses, as well as evidence of a respiratory infection. In other words, they didn't just learn who she was, they also learned what illnesses she may have had. So why was she chewing this resin? There are many hypotheses. She may have used it to relieve tooth pain, since birch resin contains betalain, a compound with natural antiseptic properties. It could also have served as a primitive form of toothbrush, or simply help curb hunger during times of food scarcity. And of course, it's also possible she chewed it out of habit, just like we chew gum today. However, these are still just theories. The true purpose of chewing this resin remains uncertain. There is only one thing we know for sure. This area was once one of the largest Stone Age sites in Denmark. It was a time of transition, when humans began shifting from hunting and gathering to farming and animal domestication, a period of overlap between the old and the new, between the wild and the civilized. Unfortunately, no human skeletons have been found at this site, so further direct analysis has been limited. But as you can see, even a discarded piece of resin has helped scientists reconstruct a person, a life, and even a forgotten piece of history. And that alone is considered a remarkable achievement in the field of archaeology. The mysterious remains of a young girl inside an ancient Egyptian tomb. Did you know that our world is always filled with mysteries and strange wonders, especially in ancient Egypt? In this land, many secrets of history are not found above ground, but buried deep beneath the scorching desert. Sometimes, all it takes is a single well-placed shovel strike and a story forgotten for thousands of years suddenly comes back to life. This time, right beside the Pyramid of Maidum, an ancient structure south of Cairo built for Pharaoh Snefru, who ruled from 2575 to 2551 BC, archaeologists uncovered a mystery that sends chills down anyone's spine. The discovery was an ancient tomb within a cemetery once surrounded by thick brick walls, though most of it has now collapsed over time. Inside, they found the skeletal remains of a young girl, about 13 years old. Her body was positioned with her knees drawn tightly to her chest, almost as if she had curled up into a squatting position. She was not laid flat. She was not arranged in the formal burial style typical of ancient Egyptian customs. The position was so unusual that archaeologists had to pause and ask themselves, was this really a normal burial? Then, as they examined the site more closely, they noticed a detail that made everything even more puzzling. Right next to her body were two large skulls of bull cattle. Yes, you heard that correctly. Not small animals or simple symbolic items, but two massive, powerful bulls, animals that often carried sacred meaning and were closely tied to rituals and beliefs in ancient Egyptian culture. In addition, 3 ancient ceramic jars were carefully placed nearby, like deliberate grave offerings. Think about it for a moment. A young girl whose identity remains unknown, buried alongside such significant and intentional items. Doesn't that suggest something more? Archaeologists believe this was no coincidence. What confuses them, however, is that this type of burial has never been documented before in Egyptian history. Further testing revealed that the girl died 4,600 years ago, nearly the same time the Pyramid of Maidum was constructed. And that detail raises an even bigger question. Why was the cemetery located right next to the pyramid? As you may know, Pharaoh Snefru, the ruler behind this structure, was not only responsible for Maidum, but was also a pioneer in the development of pyramid architecture. Originally, the structure began as a step pyramid built by Pharaoh Huni and was later transformed by Snefru into a more complete pyramid form. In many ways, this was an ambitious experimental phase in ancient Egyptian construction. And from these early innovations, Snefru's son, Pharaoh Khufu, went on to build the Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But let's return to the 13-year-old girl. Who was she? Why was she buried in such an unusual way? And what role did the 2 bulls play in this ritual? Some theories suggest she may have been part of a sacrificial ritual, where both humans and animals were offered as part of religious beliefs. Others propose that this could have been a special form of burial reserved for someone with a unique status or role within the community. Of course, these are still just hypotheses. The truth remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. This discovery has uncovered yet another layer of mystery surrounding ancient Egyptian civilization, a civilization that, whenever we speak of ancient history, we simply cannot ignore. 2,500-year-old Maya tomb, a gateway to the underworld. Deep within the dense jungles of Guatemala, where ancient ruins are slowly swallowed by time and vegetation, there stands a structure that, at first glance, appears to be nothing more than an ordinary ancient tomb. But as archaeologists dug deeper, studied it carefully, and analyzed every detail, the truth beneath the surface forced everyone to rethink everything they thought they knew. The story begins in the ancient city of Nakum, part of the Maya civilization that flourished more than 2,500 years ago. This structure was built between 700 and 300 BC, and at first, archaeologists believed they had discovered a burial site belonging to the elite class. It sounded reasonable, right? A system of underground chambers carved deep into limestone. Hidden, mysterious, everything matched what we typically expect from ancient tombs. But as excavation continued and layer after layer of soil and stone was removed, things began to feel off. There was no coffin, no human remains. Instead, they uncovered something entirely unexpected, a space that, if you stood inside it, you might not even believe it was built 2,500 years ago. It was a steam bath. Yes, you heard that right. In an ancient era when technology was still primitive, the Maya had constructed a fully functional steam bath system. It featured an enclosed design to retain heat and steam, seating areas, a drainage system, and even an oval-shaped furnace used to heat stones. When the hot stones were placed into water, steam would rise, creating an environment remarkably similar to modern-day spas. By now, you're probably wondering, how could a structure once believed to be a tomb turn out to be a bathhouse? Archaeologists are still searching for a definitive answer. However, inside the structure, they discovered numerous ritual-related artifacts. This suggests that the site was not simply used for bathing in the ordinary sense. Further studies indicate that this steam bath may have played a role in important spiritual rituals of the Maya. It was considered a gateway to the underworld, a place they believed to be the source of water and life. For the Maya, entering this steam-filled space was not just about cleansing the body. It was a journey of spiritual purification, a way to connect with deities and the world beyond. Because of this, the site may have been reserved only for individuals of high status, such as nobles or priests, those who held significant roles in the spiritual life of the community. The more researchers studied the structure, the more they realized how incredibly sophisticated it was. Every detail served a clear purpose: retaining heat, directing water, generating steam, all carefully engineered. But then, another mystery emerged. Archaeological evidence shows that after a period of use, the structure was deliberately sealed by a later Maya dynasty, filled in with mortar and debris. It wasn't destroyed by natural forces, it was intentionally buried. Why? One theory points to a shift in religious beliefs. Perhaps the rituals associated with this steam bath were no longer accepted, or even considered taboo in a later period. And so, a place that was once sacred, a bridge between humans and the unseen world, was buried by the very people who inherited that civilization. It's a compelling theory, isn't it? A place once believed to be a gateway to the underworld sealed shut by its own descendants. Could there still be deeper secrets we have yet to understand? Or perhaps beneath layers of earth and stone, there are still other gateways waiting to be uncovered, ready to reveal untold stories of the ancient Maya? It's hard to say, but what do you think? 78 skeletons reveal a chilling truth about sacrificial rituals and inbreeding in the Silla Kingdom of Korea. We've explored many mysteries of history, and as you know, some of its deepest secrets aren't written in books. They lie silently beneath the ground, waiting until humanity has the technology and patience to listen to their stories. This time, at the ancient burial site of Imdong-joyong in the southeastern Korean peninsula, 78 skeletons have begun to speak. But what they reveal is enough to send chills down anyone's spine. The site lies near Gyeongsan, close to Gyeongju, the former capital of the Silla Kingdom, one of the three kingdoms of Korea alongside Goguryeo and Baekje. These tombs date from the 4th to the 6th century AD, more than 1,500 years ago. At first glance, it seemed like a typical ancient cemetery. But when scientists began analyzing DNA from the remains, a completely different story started to emerge. Can you guess what they discovered first? It wasn't war, it wasn't disease, it was family relationships. The results showed that among the 78 skeletons, there were 11 pairs of first-degree relatives, meaning parents and children, or siblings. In addition, there were 23 pairs of close relatives, such as grandparents and grandchildren, or aunts and nieces. In other words, these individuals were not buried randomly. They were laid to rest side by side like a real family, even in death. This suggests that the Silla people placed great importance on blood relationships, carrying that bond with them even into the grave. But then, another detail made the story even more disturbing. Researchers identified at least 3 cases in which parents and children were buried at the same time. When compared with historical records, it became clear that this was no coincidence. It was the result of a ritual known as sunjang. Sunjang was a custom in which, when a high-status individual died, relatives or servants would be sacrificed and buried alongside them to serve them in the afterlife. What's particularly unsettling in this case is that those sacrificed were not just servants or slaves, but their own family members. And the discoveries didn't stop there. Genetic data allowed scientists to reconstruct as many as 13 family trees, spanning multiple generations and even connecting individuals across different burial clusters. A complex network of relationships began to take shape, showing that this society was tightly structured around lineage. Then came another shocking finding, something you might not want to hear. The rate of inbreeding within this community was relatively high. This means that marriages between close relatives, possibly even immediate or near relatives, occurred more often than we might expect. And all of it was likely done to preserve bloodlines, social status, and power within the same family. You can clearly see one thing. In Silla society, everything seemed predetermined, from the family you were born into, to whom you married, and even how you left this world. 137 handprints of the ancient Maya in a Mexican cave, a mysterious 1,200-year-old message from ancient children. Have you ever wondered, if an ancient civilization wanted to leave a message for the future, how would they do it? Build pyramids? Carve inscriptions into stone? Or something simpler like placing their hands against a cave wall, leaving behind marks that could survive for thousands of years? If you haven't, then let's journey into the world of the Maya, one of the most brilliant pre-Columbian civilizations to have ever existed. They once ruled over a vast region stretching from southeastern Mexico to Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Beginning around 400 BC, they grew rapidly, reaching their peak between AD 250 and 900, before gradually declining after the arrival of the Spanish. But what made the Maya truly remarkable wasn't just the size of their territory, it was their astonishing level of knowledge and sophistication. They understood astronomy, mathematics, architecture, and art at a level that still amazes people today. They built complex cities, tracked the movements of the stars, and created structures filled with deep spiritual meaning. And recently, a discovery on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico has made their story even more mysterious. Inside an ancient cave, archaeologists uncovered 137 handprints. Yes, not just 1 or 2, but hundreds of handprints pressed onto the rock walls in both red and black. What's even more surprising is that most of these handprints appear to belong to children. Try to imagine the scene. A deep, dark cave where sunlight barely reaches. On the stone walls, hundreds of small handprints appear, as if children once stood there, pressed their hands against the rock, and then disappeared, leaving their marks behind for thousands of years. What does it all mean? These handprints were found beneath a ceiba tree about 50 feet tall. To the Maya, this was no ordinary tree. They believed the ceiba was the axis connecting different realms, its roots reaching into the underworld, its trunk standing in the human world, and its branches supporting the heavens. In other words, the place where these handprints were found may have been a sacred space. And that's not all. In addition to the handprints, archaeologists also discovered a carved face and 6 stone reliefs, further reinforcing the idea that this site held ritual significance. But the biggest question remains unanswered. What do these handprints mean? Some believe they were part of a coming-of-age ritual, where children participated in a ceremony to mark their transition into a new stage of life. Others suggest they represent a connection between humans and the divine, especially in a sacred environment like a cave beneath a ceiba tree. However, these are still just theories. No one can say for certain what those children were thinking or feeling when they placed their hands against the cold stone wall. So imagine this. If you were a child living more than 1,200 years ago, standing inside a sacred cave and asked to press your hand against the stone, would you feel fear, curiosity, or would you believe you were part of something far greater than yourself? For the Maya, perhaps those handprints were not just physical marks, but a way of leaving a piece of their soul behind in the world. And even today, when we look at them, those small handprints remain, quietly telling a story that modern humans have yet to fully understand. Strange mummy in a 2,000-year-old tomb in Pompei, revealing the mysterious life of a wealthy former slave. A bustling city, crowded streets, busy markets, homes and temples, everything carrying on as usual. Then one day, the sky suddenly darkened. Ash began to fall like rain, and within just a few hours, everything was buried forever. That is exactly what happened to Pompei in AD 79, when Mount Vesuvius erupted violently. Thousands of people died, and the entire city was frozen in that fateful moment. Because of this, Pompei has become a true time machine, allowing us today to witness life during the Roman Empire with astonishing clarity. But here's the thing, even after nearly 2,000 years, this land has not stopped revealing new secrets. Recently, in the Porta Sarno area, a part of Pompeii not yet open to the public, archaeologists discovered a relatively large ancient tomb. Inside Anselm, they found something that stunned the scientific community, a remarkably well-preserved mummy. At first, that might sound normal for a place like Pompeii, right? But in reality, it's extremely rare. In ancient Roman culture, adults were typically cremated after death, not buried intact. So finding a body preserved this well is almost unimaginable. Think about it. After nearly 2,000 years, this individual still had white hair on his head, and even part of his ear remained intact. What does that suggest? It suggests that the body may have been deliberately mummified, a practice not common in Roman society, yet somehow present here in a very mysterious way. The structure of the tomb also played a crucial role. The body was placed in a sealed chamber which limited exposure to air and external environmental factors, creating conditions that helped preserve it. Then, as researchers began deciphering the inscriptions on the tomb, they uncovered the identity of the man. His name was Marcus Venerius Secundio, and he died at the age of 60. He had once been a slave, working at the Temple of Venus. But what's remarkable is that he did not remain in that position. He was eventually freed, and from there, he gradually rose in society. From a former slave, he became successful enough to build himself an impressive tomb, something not many people could achieve at the time. But the story doesn't end with his rise in status. Ancient records, including wax tablets belonging to a well-known banker of that era, also mention Marcus by name. This shows that he was not an unknown individual, but someone who held a recognized position within the community. The inscription on his tomb also reveals that after gaining his freedom, Marcus worked as an organizer of performances in the Greek language. Isn't that interesting? Because in Pompeii, Latin was the dominant language. The presence of Greek language performances suggests that the city was not isolated. It was a place of strong cultural exchange. This also reflects Marcus's life, a man who, despite once being a slave, was able to integrate and succeed in such a diverse society. However, one major question still remains unanswered. Was the mummification intentional or simply the result of unique environmental conditions? To this day, scientists are continuing to analyze the fabric fragments and organic materials found in the tomb, hoping to uncover a definitive answer. Until then, we'll just have to wait and see. 2,000-year-old pregnant mummy, an unprecedented mystery in ancient Egyptian history. A mummy lay undisturbed for more than 2,000 years, carefully wrapped in layers of linen, preserved through centuries without anyone suspecting anything unusual. Then one day, when modern technology finally looked inside, it revealed a secret that stunned the entire scientific community. This is the story from the National Museum in Warsaw, where an ancient Egyptian mummy, brought there in 1826, has been kept for nearly 2 centuries. For all that time, it was believed to be the body of a male priest, based on the hieroglyphic inscriptions on the coffin. Everything seemed perfectly clear until scientists decided to re-examine it using modern X-ray technology. And when the first X-ray images appeared, they saw something no one had expected: a tiny foot. Yes, not the foot of an adult, but unmistakably that of a fetus. Can you imagine how the researchers felt at that moment? A mummy that the world had long believed to be a man turned out to be the body of a pregnant woman. The more you think about it, the more puzzling and astonishing it becomes. But setting that reaction aside for a moment, further analysis revealed that the woman was between 20 and 30 years old and was about 26 to 30 weeks pregnant, nearly 7 months along. At this stage, the fetus would have been quite developed. This makes the discovery truly extraordinary, as it is the first known case of a pregnant mummy in history. But that very fact raises a series of difficult questions. Why, during the mummification process, known to be highly meticulous in ancient Egypt, was the fetus not removed? As you know, the ancient Egyptians placed great importance on preserving the body for the afterlife. They typically removed internal organs and followed strict procedures when preparing the dead. So why, in this case, was the fetus left intact? Some researchers believe this may be linked to spiritual beliefs. Perhaps they saw the unborn child as still being part of the mother, and that both needed to journey together into the afterlife in order to be reborn. It sounds both sacred and mysterious, doesn't it? However, there are other theories as well. Some suggest that the fetus may not have been intentionally left in place, but rather the result of an unusual mummification process, or simply that those performing it did not recognize the pregnancy. Whatever the reason, this remains a completely unique case, and that's not all. Thanks to modern scanning technology, scientists also discovered that the woman had long, curly hair that fell past her shoulders, a small detail, but one that makes her image feel far more vivid and human. Researchers are still working to determine the cause of her death and to better understand the unusual circumstances surrounding this mummy. But one thing is clear. This discovery is not only a breakthrough in archaeology, it also opens an entirely new direction for studying pregnancy and human life in the ancient world. An 8,600-year-old bread, a mystery from an oven in Çatalhöyük. In the sun-drenched, windswept plains of Konya in southern Turkey, where time seems frozen within layers of ancient soil, archaeologists have discovered a piece of fermented, unbaked bread dating back as far as 8,600 years. This discovery has not only sparked intense curiosity within the scientific community, but also brought with it untold stories about Neolithic people, those who lived, ate, and left behind the earliest traces of human civilization at the archaeological site of Çatalhöyük. Specifically, in an area known as Mekan 66, part of the mudbrick architectural complex of Çatalhöyük, archaeologists from the Science and Technology Application and Research Center of Necmettin Erbakan University, Batum, uncovered the remains of a collapsed oven. But it wasn't just fallen bricks. Around the oven, they also found traces of daily life: wheat, barley, legumes, and most notably, a small round piece of material about the size of a palm, holding within it a secret thousands of years old. When researchers examined this material under an electron microscope, they saw a microscopic world unlike anything previously recorded in archaeology. Tiny air pockets within the substance, clear evidence of fermentation, along with intact starch granules, confirmed that this was indeed a piece of bread, but not the kind of bread we know today. It was a portion of dough that had been mixed with water, left to ferment, and prepared for baking. Yet, for some unknown reason, the process was never completed. On its surface, the bread still bears the imprint of a fingertip, a fleeting moment captured and preserved by time, as if its maker had just touched it minutes ago rather than 86 centuries in the past. Professor Ali Umut Turkcan, head of the excavation and one of the leading archaeologists at Anadolu University, described the discovery as unprecedented in history. He emphasized that this is the first archaeological evidence showing that Neolithic humans not only made bread, but also applied fermentation techniques, a complex process requiring an understanding of how food changes over time and under environmental conditions. Biologist Salih Kavak from Gaziantep University also participated in the chemical analysis and confirmed the presence of plant-based organic compounds in the sample. Microscopic traces indicate that the bread had been carefully prepared for baking right beside the oven, reflecting a settled lifestyle in which humans were no longer dependent solely on hunting and gathering, but had developed more advanced food processing techniques. What makes this discovery extraordinary is not just its age, but also the context in which it was found. Çatalhöyük, recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was once home to around 8,000 people between 10,000 and 2000 BC. Unlike scattered villages of the same era, it had a structure resembling a compact city, with tightly connected mud brick houses and no streets. Residents moved by walking across rooftops. These people left behind wall paintings, fertility figurines, and now an unfinished piece of bread, like a doorway into the spiritual and everyday life of prehistoric humans. The remarkable preservation of the bread may be due to a thin layer of clay that covered the oven area, accidentally creating a sealed environment that protected organic material from decomposition for thousands of years. Amid layers of time, what remains is not just a piece of fermented dough, but a testament to human intelligence, skill, and the untold stories of our ancestors. This discovery not only adds a new chapter to the history of human cuisine, but also raises profound questions about the level of sophistication of early societies. 4,400-year-old tomb with dozens of cat and scarab mummies reveals mysterious rituals in ancient Egypt. In the arid deserts of Egypt, there is a place where every inch of ground beneath your feet may conceal a story thousands of years old, and sometimes all it takes is a single excavation for an entire ancient spiritual world to suddenly reappear before modern eyes. That place is Saqqara, one of the most famous and oldest burial grounds of ancient Egypt. Here, when archaeologists excavated a tomb dating back about 4,400 years, they didn't just uncover an ancient structure, they opened the door to a complex burial system filled with secrets never before revealed. Alongside the main tomb, they discovered 7 additional tombs, each containing valuable artifacts, as if layers of history were gradually being peeled back. But what truly captured everyone's attention was inside a remarkable sarcophagus. Within it were dozens of mummified cats. Not just one or two, but an entire collection of mummies, accompanied by around 100 wooden cat statues. To the ancient Egyptians, cats were not merely pets, they were symbols of protection, power, and the sacred. To better understand this, archaeologists uncovered a crucial detail: a bronze statue of Bastet, the cat goddess representing love, joy, and protection. This clearly shows that the cat mummies were not buried randomly, but were part of religious rituals deeply rooted in ancient Egyptian belief systems. But the story doesn't end there. Within the same burial complex, archaeologists also discovered something equally surprising: mummified scarab beetles. It may sound insignificant, but to the ancient Egyptians, this creature carried profound meaning. The scarab was closely associated with Khepri, the god representing the rising sun and rebirth. Each day, the sun rises and sets, symbolizing a cycle of life, death, and renewal. And the Egyptians believed the scarab embodied this eternal cycle. That is why the discovery of carefully sealed coffins bearing scarab imagery confirms that these beetles played an important role in funerary rituals. They were not just symbols, they were a source of hope for a new life in the afterlife. Isn't that fascinating? On one side, cats, representing protection and power. On the other, scarabs, symbolizing rebirth and eternity. Both appearing within the same tomb, as if telling a complete story about the beliefs of the people of that time. They didn't just think about death, they believed in a journey beyond it. And perhaps it was these very beliefs that led them to prepare for death with such care and ritual. So let me ask you this: if you lived in ancient Egypt, would you believe that death was simply a doorway and that creatures like cats or scarabs could guide you into the next world? DNA reveals a 4,000-year-old truth about the Xiaohe princess, the famous princess of Xinjiang. In a place so harsh that even its name evokes a sense of desolation, the Lop Nur Desert in Xinjiang, there exists a story that has puzzled archaeologists for decades. Not because they failed to find evidence, but quite the opposite. They found too many strange things, so many that it became difficult to explain them logically. Among these discoveries, the most remarkable is a mummy known by a mysterious name, the Xiaohe princess. The story began in 2004, when the Xiaohe cemetery was recognized as one of China's top 10 archaeological discoveries. During excavations, archaeologists uncovered numerous mummies buried deep beneath the scorching sands. Yet among them, one female body stood out, so much so that anyone who saw it would pause for a few seconds. Not because it was frightening, but because it was astonishingly well preserved. The body was almost completely intact. Her hair remained, her skin retained its form, and most strikingly, her face carried a strange, gentle expression, as if she were smiling. For this reason, she became known as the Smiling Princess, or the Xiaohe Princess. However, what puzzled scientists even more was her appearance. Unlike the typical features associated with ancient Asian populations, this princess displayed traits that resembled those of Europeans. She wore clothing made of wool, and archaeological evidence suggests that her people's diet included beef, mutton, millet, wheat, barley, and even cheese, foods that were not common in this region at that time. So think about it. How could a woman who lived about 4,000 years ago in an isolated desert possess features that many would associate with Europeans? This is where the story becomes complicated. For many years, numerous hypotheses were proposed. Some believed these people came from Siberia, others suggested Central Asia or even northern Afghanistan. But all of these remained speculation until modern technology provided answers. A study published in the prestigious scientific journal Nature completely changed the narrative. Scientists from the United States, Germany, China, and South Korea collaborated to analyze the DNA of 18 mummies, including 13 from the Shaohe site. Among them, this famous princess. The results left the entire archaeological community stunned. Genetic analysis revealed that these individuals were not migrants from elsewhere. Instead, they were direct descendants of an ancient population dating back to the Holocene, tens of thousands of years ago, around the end of the Ice Age. This was a population that had once been widespread but had nearly vanished from human history. In other words, they represented a distinct ancient lineage with a gene pool that was almost completely isolated. A rare surviving legacy within the course of human evolution. This finding effectively overturned all previous theories about origins in Siberia or Central Asia. These people had lived, developed, and reproduced within the Tarim Basin itself in remarkable isolation. As a result, they possessed highly unique genetic traits, so distinct that only a small trace remains in modern humans today. Does that give you chills? A culture that once existed independently in a harsh desert, neither fully assimilated nor entirely erased, quietly leaving behind traces that endure to this day. According to experts, this discovery not only helps solve the mystery of the Shaohe princess, but also opens up an entirely new perspective on cultural interactions during the Bronze Age in Asia. It shows that human history is far more complex than we once believed. But the story doesn't end there. Let's return to our main figure, the Shaohe princess. The title sounds noble, doesn't it? But the reality is quite surprising. Despite being called a princess, she was not royalty, did not belong to the elite, and held no special social status. Her burial method, as well as the grave goods found with her, were identical to those of ordinary individuals in the cemetery. So why call her a princess? Simply put, because she was extraordinarily beautiful. A beauty so striking that it's hard to believe her body had lain beneath the sand for 4,000 years. A delicate, peaceful face with a faint smile that seems to linger from the past. And perhaps that is what makes this story so captivating. You see, from an ordinary person living in a mysterious community, she unexpectedly became the key to unlocking one of the greatest questions in modern archaeology. Fascinating, isn't it? A 2,000-year-old bog mummy reveals a chilling secret about the death of the Wide Girl. You know, the ancient world is incredibly fascinating. Some of history's greatest mysteries don't come from massive monuments or vast treasures. They begin with something surprisingly ordinary. And the story of this 2,000-year-old mummy is exactly like that. From a routine act of cutting peat, people accidentally uncovered a secret that has sent chills through the scientific community for more than a century. But to truly understand this story, we need to go back to the year 1897. That year, in a bog near the village of Id in the Netherlands, two workers were going about their usual task of cutting peat when they suddenly discovered a body. At first glance, they thought it was a young girl who had died recently, because the body was almost perfectly preserved, showing none of the usual signs of decomposition. But the more they looked, the more something felt off. Realizing this wasn't an ordinary case, they quickly reported it to local archaeologists. When experts arrived, the truth they uncovered left everyone stunned. This was not a recent death. The body had been lying beneath the peat for approximately 2,000 years. At this point, you might be wondering, how could a body be preserved for so long? The answer lies in the peat bog itself. With its low oxygen environment and high acidity, it effectively acts as a natural mummification chamber, preserving human remains for thousands of years. And this girl was one of those rare cases. For convenience, scientists named her Wai after the village where she was found. Through their research, they determined that she died at around 16 years old, sometime between 54 BC and AD 128. Such a young age, and that alone makes her story even more haunting. But the truly disturbing details lie in the marks on her body. Around her neck, researchers found a rope still tightly wrapped. And that wasn't all. There was also evidence of a stab wound near her collarbone. Just imagining it is enough to tell that this was no ordinary death. Even more unsettling, her face, after 2,000 years, still carries an expression that many find hard to look at for long. It's not exactly one of pain, but there's a heavy, eerie quality to it, as if she endured moments of deep fear and terror in her final seconds. There's also another strange detail that has puzzled experts. All of her teeth were missing. No one knows whether they were lost before or after her death, and there are no clear clues to explain it. Then there's her hair. One half was cut short, while the other half remained long. This led many to question, was it part of a ritual, or perhaps a sign of punishment? Of course, there are no definitive answers. However, when modern technology was applied, CT scans revealed even more surprising details. Maid suffered from severe scoliosis, and her right leg was abnormally swollen. This means that when she was alive, she likely had difficulty walking and may have been seen as different by those around her. Now think about that. Living in an ancient society where differences were often met with fear or discrimination, what kind of life would a girl like that have faced? In 1994, experts reconstructed Maid's face using scientific data. The result revealed a young girl with striking red hair and a fairly gentle, pleasant appearance. No longer just a frightening mummy, she became a real person, someone who once lived, existed, and had her own story. Sadly, that story was cut short in a deeply mysterious way. To this day, the exact cause of Maid's death remains unknown, and that uncertainty has led to numerous theories. Some believe she may have been the victim of an ancient ritual sacrifice where humans were offered to the gods. Whether this theory is true or not remains unclear. But if it is, then her death was not only painful but also inescapable. Another theory suggests that Maid may have committed a serious offense and was executed in a brutal manner. The marks on her body seem to support this possibility. But in the end, these are all just theories. And that's what makes this story so haunting. A 16-year-old girl who lived 2,000 years ago, killed under unknown circumstances, then buried in a cold, silent bog for millennia. If not for that chance discovery in 1897, her secret might have remained hidden forever. It just goes to show, history is not as quiet as we once thought. It always finds a way to come back to life, often in the most unexpected and ordinary ways. The 12 mummies of Egyptian gold miners in Sudan. Hey, have you ever wondered? Behind the wealth and power of ancient Egypt, the pyramids, and vast reserves of gold, who were the people who actually made all of that possible? History doesn't always mention them. And that's exactly why this discovery on a small island in Sudan has made so many people rethink what we know. The story begins on Sai Island, a remote area located about 125 miles from the Egyptian border. Today it's quite desolate, but thousands of years ago, it was a major gold mining hub of ancient Egypt. During an excavation led by archaeologists from Ludwig Maximilian University, as part of a project funded by the European Research Council, they unexpectedly uncovered a secret buried for more than 3 millennia. At first, they only expected to find a few traces of the past, things like pottery or remnants of ancient structures. But the deeper they dug, the more they realized something unusual lay beneath the hardened ground. And then, the discovery emerged. An ancient mass grave dating back about 3,400 years slowly revealed itself before their eyes. But what truly silenced everyone wasn't the structure of the tomb, it was what lay inside. Because inside were not 1, not 2, but 12 mummies, lying side by side, silent as if telling a story no one had ever heard. They were not kings, not nobles. They were simply ancient Egyptian gold miners, ordinary people, yet essential to sustaining the wealth of an entire empire. By now, you're probably starting to picture the story, right? But wait, the most intriguing part doesn't stop there. It lies in the details surrounding them. These mummies have been identified as belonging to Egypt's New Kingdom period, around 1150 to 1077 BC. This was a time when Egypt reached the height of its power, expanding its influence into many regions, including what is now Sudan. So what were these miners doing here? The answer is clear. They were extracting gold. Sai Island was once a crucial mining site where laborers worked under harsh conditions to fuel the wealth of an empire. But what puzzled archaeologists wasn't just their identity, it was how they were buried. A mass grave is highly unusual in ancient Egyptian culture, where burials were typically careful and individualized. So why were these 12 individuals laid to rest together? Could they have died in the same event? A mining accident? Or perhaps a disease that claimed their lives in a short period of time? No one knows for sure, but the objects found around them open up even more fascinating possibilities. Inside the tomb, archaeologists discovered remains of gold funerary masks, items usually associated with higher social status. There was also a gold ring, scarab beetles, sacred symbols in Egyptian culture, along with pottery fragments, containers, and a finely carved small stone Ushabti statue. Hearing this, doesn't it feel a bit out of place? Ordinary workers, yet buried with items of such ceremonial significance. This suggests that although their social status may not have been high, they were still valued in some way, at least in the rituals meant to guide them into the afterlife. But perhaps the most important clue isn't any of these artifacts. It's their DNA. Samples taken from the mummies have been sent to the Max Planck Institute in Germany, home to one of the world's leading laboratories in archaeological genetics. There, scientists hope to read the hidden story behind these remains. They want to know where these miners came from, what their health was like, whether they showed signs of disease or injury, and most importantly, what caused them to die together and be buried in the same grave. With just a small amount of genetic data, an entire life story can begin to take shape. It may sound unbelievable, but that's the power of modern science. And who knows, once these analyses are complete, we may not only understand the deaths of these 12 individuals, but also gain a clearer picture of the lives of ordinary workers in one of the greatest civilizations in history. Because sometimes, the greatest secrets aren't hidden in grand palaces, they're buried alongside ordinary people, in places few ever think to look. Bizarre cache of animal mummies in Egypt. Lion cubs, cobras, and the mystery of ancient rituals. Just imagine this, what if one day people opened an ancient tomb and instead of human remains, they found an entire collection of mummified animals from lions and snakes to crocodiles? How would that feel? Even thinking about it sends a chill down your spine, right? And the truth is, this isn't imagination. It actually happened in Egypt, a land already famous for its thousands of unsolved mysteries. At the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt, researchers uncovered a discovery that surprised even the most experienced experts. But of course, this treasure wasn't gold or royal tombs. It was a vast collection of animal mummies, preserved in remarkably good condition. What makes this discovery especially fascinating is the diversity of the subjects inside. There was a lion cub, an extremely rare find, as very few mummified lions have ever been discovered before. Alongside it were the remains of 5 large cats, as well as cobras, animals closely associated with power and divinity in Egyptian culture. And it didn't stop there. There were also crocodiles and birds, all carefully mummified and astonishingly well preserved over time. According to experts, these mummies date back to around the 7th century BC, a period when religious beliefs and rituals played a central role in daily life. In fact, the head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities once stated that this discovery is not just an excavation, it opens a doorway to a deeper understanding of how ancient people viewed the world. And when you look a little deeper, everything begins to follow its own kind of logic. In ancient Egyptian culture, animals were not just ordinary creatures. They represented gods, supernatural power, and sometimes even served as a bridge between humans and the spiritual realm. For example, cats were closely associated with the goddess Bastet, a symbol of protection and family. Cobras represented royal authority and divine power. Crocodiles were linked to the god Sobek, the deity of the Nile and strength. So mummifying these animals was no random act. According to some Egyptologists, ancient people often offered special gifts to their gods, and one of those offerings was mummified animals. This was a way to show devotion, to seek protection, or to ask for blessings. In other words, each animal mummy here is not just a specimen, but a part of a sacred ritual. But what makes this discovery even more intriguing is this. Why were there so many of them, all buried in one place? Could this have been a large-scale ritual center, or a site where offerings were gathered over many generations? To this day, scientists are still working to find definitive answers. However, one thing is certain. This discovery has given us an entirely new perspective on ancient Egypt. It's not just about pyramids or human mummies. It's about a rich spiritual world where animals played a role just as important. And perhaps the most fascinating part is this: the more we uncover, the more we realize how little we truly know about this civilization. What do you think? Do you believe these animal mummies were simply offerings? Or could they be hiding deeper secrets that we haven't yet uncovered? Drop your thoughts in the comments below so everyone can join the discussion. Burial chamber of 35 Egyptian mummies on the banks of the Nile. Have you ever imagined this scene? One day, you step into an ancient room, dark, silent to the point where you can hear your own heartbeat, and then suddenly realize that dozens of mummies are lying all around you? How would you react? If you haven't, then come with me to the west bank of the Nile, in the city of Aswan, Egypt. Here stands the tomb of a well-known religious figure of the Ismaili sect, the Aga Khan. But today, we're not focusing on that tomb. Instead, we're looking at a discovery made nearby. During a survey and excavation in the area, archaeologists uncovered a mysterious ancient burial chamber containing as many as 35 mummies. Yes, you heard that right. Not just a few scattered remains, but an entire space filled with ancient Egyptian mummies, lying in silence for thousands of years. Archaeological analysis indicates that these mummies date back to around the 6th century BC, a time when burial rituals and beliefs about the afterlife had become highly complex. Each individual in that chamber once lived, had a family, and carried their own story. Yet in the end, they were all laid to rest together in the same space. Naturally, this raises a compelling question. Who were they, and why were they buried together? For now, those questions remain unanswered. However, one notable detail found inside the chamber was a stretcher made of palm wood and linen. It may sound simple, but it reveals an important part of ancient Egyptian funeral practices. Most likely, this was used to transport the deceased from the place of death to their final resting place. This suggests that burial was not a random act. It was a carefully organized process, rich with ritual meaning, and that's not all. Scattered throughout the chamber were numerous ancient artifacts. Some grave goods were placed beside the mummies, like gifts sent along with the deceased into the afterlife. Notably, some jars still contained leftover food, a small detail, but one that speaks volumes. Ancient Egyptians believed that after death, the soul continued to exist and required care. Food, personal items, and even valuable objects were buried with the dead as preparation for life in the next world. In addition, archaeologists found fragments of gold-plated funerary masks, objects typically used to protect and honor the deceased. Even more intriguing was a small statue depicting a bird with a human head, a symbol of the soul in ancient Egyptian belief. It may sound unusual, but for them, this represented the soul as something that could separate from the body, fly freely, yet still remain connected to the world of the living. When all these details come together, they paint a clearer picture of how ancient Egyptians viewed death. To them, death was not an end, but a continuation of a journey. Yet what makes this discovery truly remarkable is not just the number, 35 mummies, but the fact that they were all placed together in a single space. Was this a large family, a community, or a group of people who shared the same fate? For now, the answer remains unknown. And perhaps it is precisely this mystery that makes the story so captivating. Because the more we explore, the more we realize that each mummy is not just a body, but a piece of history, waiting to be assembled into a complete story of its own. 4,000-year-old palace that rewrites the history of ancient civilization. There are places that, at first glance, seem completely ordinary, just an old mound of earth lying quietly along a border. But beneath the surface, they may be hiding an entire chapter of history that humanity has almost forgotten. And the story of this 4,000-year-old palace begins in just such a place. At Oylum Huyuk, located right along the border between Turkey and Syria, a name that might sound unfamiliar, archaeologists have made a discovery that is forcing experts to rethink the ancient civilizations of this region. During excavations, a team from Gaziantep University uncovered a massive structure. It wasn't a house nor a typical residential area. Instead, it turned out to be the remains of an ancient palace dating back roughly 4,000 years. That alone is astonishing. But what surprised archaeologists even more was the scale and layout of the structure. What they found suggests that the palace shares similarities with major centers of power discovered in well-known ancient cities like Alalak and Tilman-Hoyuk. This means the site was far from insignificant. It was once a center of authority, a place where major decisions may have been made, where political meetings took place, and perhaps even where intrigues unfolded that history never recorded. But this leads to a big question. If this was once such an important palace, why did it disappear? Part of the answer lies in the traces left behind. According to experts, the structure was destroyed by a massive fire. Not only that, there are clear signs that it was later looted. In other words, after the flames consumed the palace, whatever remained did not escape human hands. A once grand palace full of power and influence, suddenly engulfed in fire, then abandoned and forgotten for thousands of years. It sounds like something out of a historical film, doesn't it? But the story doesn't end there. Among the ruins, archaeologists discovered a detail of great importance: a cuneiform inscribed tablet. Its content is a message addressed to a local king of the Hittite Empire, bearing the line, "To the king of the land of Nuhashsi." Just a single line, but it acts like a key, unlocking an entire door to the past. It shows that this site once had connections to the Hittite kingdom, one of the major civilizations of the region at that time. And this could help researchers better understand the role of this palace within a broader historical context. Experts estimate that most of the palace still lies buried underground, about 10 to 13 feet below the surface. This means that what has been uncovered so far is only the beginning. So think about it. If just a small portion has already astonished archaeologists, what secrets might still lie beneath? An untouched treasure? Writings that have never been read? Or even evidence that could reshape how we understand the history of this region? It's hard to say, isn't it? But I have a feeling you might already have your own answer. So don't hesitate, drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's explore this mystery together. Mysterious pyramid reveals the timeless face of a 4,000-year-old princess. When we think of pyramids, we usually imagine massive structures filled with unsolved mysteries, especially those in Egypt. But here's the thing, not all Egyptian pyramids are famous. Some lie quietly beneath layers of sand, unnoticed until one day, they reveal a secret powerful enough to astonish the entire archaeological world. And the case at Dashur, an ancient royal necropolis located about 22 miles south of Cairo, is a perfect example. During a survey conducted by experts from Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, they discovered a pyramid with an unusual structure, unlike the ones previously known. That alone was enough to prompt a deeper excavation. Then, upon entering the interior, they came across an ancient coffin resting silently in a sealed space for thousands of years. At first, the coffin didn't seem particularly remarkable. It had been broken into multiple pieces, its wood decayed, its parts scattered by the passage of time. But as the fragments were carefully reassembled, something unexpected began to emerge. A face. Not just a simple drawing, but a carefully detailed human face carved directly onto the surface of the coffin. Every line, every feature was distinct, so much so that it felt less like an artifact and more like the presence of a real person. Why would ancient people carve a face onto a coffin? What were they trying to preserve? The answer came through scientific analysis. Experts determined that the remains inside belonged to Hatshepsut, the daughter of Pharaoh Amenemhat, who lived around 4,000 years ago. A royal figure, yet one who appears only rarely in historical records. That's why this discovery feels like finding a missing piece of a long-lost puzzle. Beyond the coffin, the burial site also contained several ancient jars inscribed with carefully carved hieroglyphs. Among them, the phrase "king's daughter" appeared clearly, confirming the identity of the deceased. All these details, when put together, form a fairly clear picture of the princess's identity. But the story is not entirely complete. Before archaeologists arrived, the pyramid had already been looted by tomb robbers. They broke into the coffin and took many valuable grave goods, including jewelry, items that ancient Egyptians believed were essential for the afterlife. That means part of the history has been lost forever. And yet, what remains is still enough to leave a deep impression. A princess who lived 4,000 years ago, buried in her own pyramid, with her face carved onto her coffin as a way to preserve her image. Despite the passage of time, despite the damage and intrusion, that image endured, waiting to be rediscovered. Perhaps what makes this discovery so special is not just its archaeological value, but what it reveals about how ancient people viewed death. To them, death was not an end, it was a continuation, a journey where identity and memory still needed to be preserved. And so, thousands of years later, when the sand is brushed away, a face appears once more, silent, yet powerful enough to tell an entire story. 48 ancient lamps illuminate a 1,500-year-old secret in Zerzavon Castle. There are places that are more than just ruins. They're like sealed history books, waiting for the right moment to be opened. And Zerzavon Castle in Turkey is one of those places. Located near the Chinar district of Diyarbakir, this ancient structure is breathtaking at first sight. Its stone walls rise about 40 to 50 feet high and stretch for over 3,900 feet, standing firm in a harsh, arid landscape like an unbreakable fortress. And that's not all. The site also features a watchtower reaching about 69 feet in height, along with strong defensive structures, a church, storage areas for food and weapons, a water supply system, and more than 50 cisterns, a highly complex and well-organized layout. Just hearing that, you can tell this was no ordinary place, right? But what truly caught the attention of archaeologists lies deep underground, an area untouched for thousands of years. During a recent excavation, experts from Turkey's Ministry of Culture and Tourism discovered dozens of unusual artifacts. At first, they seemed quite simple, but upon closer analysis, their true significance began to emerge. Yes, the artifacts in question are 48 ancient lamps, dating back about 1,500 years to the Roman era. That means they come from a time when people lived with beliefs and systems of faith very different from those of today. Each lamp carries its own unique design. Some are engraved with palm trees, symbols of life and rebirth. Others feature the sun, rays of light, or stars, elements connected to the power of nature and the universe. Some even bear special markings, like messages left behind from the past. According to experts, these symbols were not random. They held deep meaning, tied to beliefs about eternal life, the power of a creator, and the connection between humans and the natural world. In other words, these lamps were not just tools for lighting, they also carried spiritual significance. What's even more intriguing is that during the excavation, archaeologists also found lamp molds located right next to these artifacts. And this detail is what truly made them reconsider the role of Zerzavon Castle. Because if molds were present, it means these lamps were not only used here, they were actually produced on site. In other words, this location may once have been a large-scale lamp production workshop in ancient times. So this raises an important question. Why would a military fortress include a production center for spiritually significant lamps? Could it be that this place was not just a fortress, but also a religious or ritual center? These questions still remain unanswered. What we do know is that Zerzavon Castle was more than just a defensive structure. With its complex infrastructure, living spaces, underground worship areas, and now evidence of production activity, it resembles a miniature city that existed during the Roman era. And those 48 lamps, perhaps they are the key to understanding how people of that time lived, believed, and connected with the world around them. Forgotten Church, buried for nearly 1,000 years. In 1066, under the banner of the Duke of Normandy, William, later known as William the Conqueror, thousands of warriors, from Normans and Bretons to Flemish and French forces, landed on the shores of England. In the Battle of Hastings, they defeated the army of King Harold II, marking the beginning of an entirely new era. After this victory, William quickly took control of southeastern England, capturing Dover and Winchester before advancing on London. By Christmas of that same year, he was officially crowned, becoming the first king of the Norman dynasty in England. But what the Normans brought was not just a political takeover. Under their rule, the entire social structure, legal system, and land ownership of England were fundamentally rewritten. They built formidable fortresses, introduced Norman law, and left a legacy that still shapes the country today. During his campaign of expansion, William passed through a remote area within the parish of Stoke. About half a mile from the main village stood a solitary church known as St. Mary's. Built around the year 1080, this church sat in a low-lying area, surrounded only by empty fields. Over the centuries, it gradually fell into obscurity, and when a new church was constructed in a more convenient location in the 19th century, St. Mary's was abandoned, eventually demolished, seemingly bringing its chapter of history to a permanent end. But nearly a millennium later, its fate took an unexpected turn. When the British government launched the HS2 high-speed railway project through this region, they had no idea they were about to uncover a buried historical treasure. A team of archaeologists, led by Dr. Rachel Wood, began excavating the site where St. Mary's once stood. What they discovered was astonishing. Thousands of ancient graves, along with numerous artifacts from different periods, began to emerge. And the findings didn't stop at the Norman era. As they dug deeper, archaeologists uncovered the remains of an Anglo-Saxon church, built before the Normans ever arrived. Evidence from the Bronze Age, Iron Age, and even traces of Roman life were also found, proving that this area had been an important cultural crossroads for centuries. Among the most striking discoveries were square flint stone walls, about 3 feet wide, surrounded by a circular ditch. This design closely resembles another Saxon church still standing in Barton upon Humber, near the Humber estuary, further confirming the sacred and long-standing historical significance of the site. In September 2021, Dr. Wood shared, "The surviving parts of the church, including stone walls and flooring, will help us better understand the period before the Norman church was built in 1080. She emphasized that this is a rare opportunity for archaeologists to directly study evidence from the pre-Norman era, something that is only sparsely recorded in historical documents. And if you think that's where the story ends, think again. During the excavation, they also discovered the shoulders and heads of 2 life-sized Roman busts buried inside a dark earthen jar. Alongside them were multiple cremation urns, an intricately crafted glass vessel, and most disturbingly, a headless skeleton bearing signs of severe torture before death. What has been revealed beneath the soil of Stoke doesn't just revive a forgotten past, it raises new and unsettling questions about early medieval England. And the biggest question is this: how many more secrets are still waiting to be uncovered beneath our feet? Perhaps we don't know yet, but hopefully in the future, archaeologists will help us find the answer. The mysterious Nazi submarine that sank over 7 decades ago. You've probably heard many thrilling and mysterious stories about World War II, but few people realize that deep beneath the ocean, a long-forgotten historical relic has just been uncovered after more than 7 decades, stunning the world. In mid-April, a team of explorers from the Jutland War Museum in Denmark accidentally discovered the wreck of the German Navy submarine U-3523, resting at a depth of about 404 feet, a finding that could completely change how we view the final days of World War II. This was no ordinary vessel. It was a technological masterpiece of its time, belonging to the Type 21 class, the most advanced submarines ever built by Nazi Germany. The submarine was nearly 253 feet long, weighed close to 2,000 tons, could dive to depths of about 919 feet, and had an operational range of over 17,800 miles. This is precisely the type of submarine that led historians to question whether it might have been used to secretly transport Adolf Hitler and his close associates to South America before the war ended. According to records from the British Ministry of Defense, on May 6, 1945, U-3523 was attacked by a B-24 Liberator bomber from the Royal Air Force while attempting to escape. However, for nearly 80 years, no wreckage was found, fueling speculation that the submarine may have survived the attack and fled. Adding to the mystery, reports from the CIA, based on supposedly credible witnesses, claimed that Hitler was seen in South America, specifically in Colombia and Argentina, in the years following World War II. On top of that, rumors of a massive treasure, valuable assets hastily hidden aboard U-3523 by high-ranking officials of the Third Reich before their defeat, have made the story even more intriguing and captivating. The wreck was discovered about 11 miles north of Skagen, Denmark's northernmost point, and more than 10 miles west of the location where British forces had reported bombing it. This discrepancy only deepens the mystery surrounding its fate. Mr. Gert Norman Andersen, director of the Jutland War Museum, stated that the submarine lies at a depth of over 328 feet, 100 meters, but recovery is nearly impossible. The bow is buried in sand, while the stern stands unusually upright, rising about 66 feet the seabed. This not only makes excavation extremely difficult, but also raises more questions about the submarine's final moments and the secrets it may still hold. The museum also preserves a copy of the submarine's final radio message, sent by its captain to German Naval Command. The message indicates that the vessel was heading back to its base in Norway to resupply and prepare for its next patrol, apparently unaware that Nazi Germany had already lost the war. Mr. Anderson emphasized that theories suggesting Hitler and top Nazi officials escaped aboard U-3523 are merely conspiracy theories, as all 58 crew members aboard the submarine perished at sea. However, it is precisely this lack of clear answers that continues to fuel curiosity about the unknown aspects of this submarine. In fact, starting in late 1943, the German Navy had ordered the construction of 118 Type 21 submarines in hopes of regaining naval dominance, but only 2 were fully completed and delivered in early 1945, one of them being U-3523. The other, U-3525, was also considered an undetectable submarine, but it was sunk just days before the war ended. Another submarine of the same class, U-2540, also known as Wilhelm Bauer, was salvaged almost intact in 1957 and is now preserved as a valuable military artifact, showcasing the advanced technology of German submarines at the time. Remarkably, the innovations of the Type 21 submarines later inspired Allied nations to develop modern submarines, ushering in a new era of naval engineering. The story of U-3523 and its surrounding mysteries is not just an underwater archaeological discovery, it's a historical investigation filled with intrigue, raising unanswered questions about secret escape plans, wartime conspiracies, and hidden treasures of the past century. So what do you think about the mysteries surrounding U-3523? Was there really a secret escape plan involving Hitler and a vast hidden fortune beneath the sea? Or are there even deeper secrets yet to be uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss it together. As you can see, the mysteries of the past have never stopped captivating the modern world. From the cold, silent layers deep beneath the earth to the remnants resting quietly on the ocean floor, every archaeological discovery is a valuable piece of the puzzle, revealing a history that was once forgotten. Archaeologists and scientists have worked tirelessly for years, overcoming harsh terrains and extreme conditions to bring us those breathtaking moments when we come face to face with a fragment of the past's very soul. In today's video, we've taken a journey together through some of the most unusual and world-shaking archaeological discoveries, findings that not only reveal historical truths, but also stir deep emotions in those who witness them. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below, hit like, and subscribe to the channel so you can continue joining us on future journeys, exploring the deepest mysteries of time. Thank you for watching, and for now, goodbye, and see you next time.